Yourself. You're on. Introduce yourself and let's get into your budget.
Hello, my name is Karen Wall. I am the library director. Thank you very much for meeting with me this evening.
And I'm Stephen Sage. I'm the chairperson of the library trustees.
Before you, you have our FY24 proposed budget, and I'll just go through pretty much line by line, or section by section, I should say. In the salary section, there were the two what I would consider significant changes would be we're in the process of promoting one of our staff members who will be completing her master's degree in July. It's actually more of a title change for her. She's been performing the tasks associated with this position for probably the last couple of years, but she decided to go and get her master's degree in library and information science so that she can attain this higher level position. So she'll be graduating in July, and we're delighted. And so, as I said, she's performing about 90% of the tasks already. So this will be, you know, promoting her into that position officially. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is just the cost of living increases. Those are the only two differences in the salary section. Any questions on that section?
Salaries. Any questions on the salaries that Karen's gone over? No?
I've got some, notes over in the comments section explaining, and they kind of inform what the narrative is, so they should kind of mirror each other. Under the services and supplies expense section, the library materials section is dictated by Mass General Law. That has to be 16% of our total allocated municipal income. So every time there's a change, I have to recalculate that. But I have a handy-dandy formula at my ready. And as it stands now, the 95.7 is 16%.
Okay.
And if we don't meet that, we are in danger of losing our certification. So that's pretty important.
And then that's a breakdown of what you spend the 97 on.
Yes, I mean, it's a loose breakdown.
Yeah.
I tend to look at what my expenditures are historically, because they change, and they, depending on what the trends are, we're seeing a little bit more. You'll see the physical audio line. I'll probably end up pulling some money out of there, putting it into the downloadable and streaming line, because I keep statistics on all of the usage, and I'm seeing an uptick in the downloadable and streaming and a downtick in the audio, so I keep an eye on that kind of stuff and adjust accordingly. So basically those percentages I just carried them over from last year. And on the next page, it's so office supplies, circ supplies are pretty much based on history and price increases. As you know, everything's kind of gone through the roof. The next line down, where I have furniture and fixtures, technology that's not paid for by the town, I had put in a copy machine because ours is reaching the end of its serviceable life, and they Expert Laser, or whatever they're called now, can no longer get parts for it, et cetera. It's about 10 years old. So we've milked every last bit out of it that we can get, and I called Expert, and they gave me that number of 5,000. So that's where that comes from. The rest of it, let's see, the software, this is, pretty much flat. CW Mars is our assessment fee. CW Mars is the library consortium that we belong to. It's approximately 160 libraries in central and western Massachusetts, and that's our catalog. That's our catalog system. So we have a sharing system with all of these other libraries, and every one of those libraries gets an assessment, so that the CW Mars consortium can provide the cataloging services and sharing resources. And ours is $16,100. I'm sorry. Yeah, it actually went down. It went down slightly. Where there were a few new libraries added, because they're always bringing new libraries into the fold, so that helps us as well. Let's see. So in the website host and marketing, that $700 increase was as a result of, there was a charge that I did not comprehend last year, so it's actually a flat amount of money, but this year I'll go over by 700 because I didn't comprehend it. I wasn't aware of it last year, so being a newbie. The remaining mileage and training I kept flat. Under the building, this is where I have a significant increase, or what I would consider a significant increase. As if you may recall, last year we talked about building repairs, and I went back about 6 years and determined that we had an average of about $40,000 of repairs per year, and we were getting up to that point about $10,000 in our budget. So last year you very graciously gave us $20,000, and this year I'm hoping that we can get it at 30. And I think that if we could get it up to that point, we could probably leave it there. I had put it in for 40 last year, and as I said, you were very gracious and gave us 20. So that's where the 30 is coming from, just to get us a little bit closer to reality on that front. We've got such a beautiful library, we want to keep it in good repair. The remainder of it, aside from the water cooler, which is flat, the remainder of it are all service contracts. And we did call all of the vendors, so those are legitimate amounts of money.
Okay. The actual quotes that you got for the services you're asking for.
That's correct. Questions? Actually, before you ask any questions, I just wanted to give you a little information about what I use when I go through and I compile I develop the budget. And I use a needs versus wants logic. So, obviously, keeping the building in good repair, that would be a need, and the service contracts, et cetera, salaries. But for wants, and for instance, we don't have a programming line item in our budget, and we do a very robust programming at the library, as anyone who attends them will tell you. And for that, we use our state aid grant money. And
When you say programming, you mean to pay for the person to do it, or for the materials to do programming?
Both, actually. We do in-house programming, so that requires some materials, supplies, and things like that. That's not a very big amount of money, so, we'll take that out of our, sometimes the Friends of the Library will pay for that. And sometimes the Friends of the Library will also pay for performers to come as well. Over the last few years, the Friends have struggled. I think COVID really did them in. And when I came on board about a little over a year ago, I started to rejuvenate the Friends. And we're just now, we've gotten them 501c3 status. And and we're starting a membership drive, and we're breathing more life into the Friends of the Library group, because they do provide things like our museum passes, summer reading program, performers, and supplies, and adult programming as well, some smaller ticket items, as well as some materials that we have in the library too.
Is this run by volunteers or by staff members?
The Friends of the Library is all volunteer.
All volunteers.
Yeah. It was a year of heavy lifting, getting the 501c3, I will say, but we got it, and it was worth it, because now we can do some, fundraising and do a membership drive, and those monies will be tax deductible for the people that participate. So we're on our way. And I also, for wants, will apply for grants. For instance, I just received a grant from the Massachusetts Cultural Council to turn one of our meeting rooms, the community meeting room, into, I mean, it's, already a meeting room, but I wanted to have some nice exhibit space so that we could have a monthly rotating exhibit. And I received a grant for $38,000 from Mass Cultural Council to do that. I just found out last week, so
Congratulations.
thank you so much. So that's kind of my logic when I go through. I try not to ask for more than I need,
Mhm.
in a nutshell.
That's appreciated by us,
I'm sure.
because we like to say yes, unless we have to say no.
Yeah, I get it.
One question I've got, and it's as much for Ashley, is a $5,000 copier, that'd be a capital expense, not an operating expense, correct?
We usually have a threshold for 10,000 for capital.
10,000 for capital.
Yeah,
So you want to leave that
I guess
in this
that,
proposed budget
that'd be.
as an
a-
operating?
I don't see a problem with it, but it would be, I guess, a you guys call. If you'd rather see it in capital, we can put it through capital.
Okay.
I don't have a lot in capital this year, but usually I think we set like a $10,000
But it's 10,000, okay.
threshold, yeah.
Actually, Henry, I had the same question on the repairs. So Karen, are any of these repairs, is this just general maintenance, or are there any capital repairs that are required?
No, I have two capital items separate from this that
Okay.
are over $10,000 that we already know of, big projects. So anything, I have 3 capital projects this fiscal year. Unfortunately, the vendors are running into parts issues, and then, of course, weather-related, not be able to do outside type work with weather. So, no, it does not include capital. It's, HVAC system goes down, it needs a new, VFD or something like that, that's gonna cost $3,000. Those things are very expensive, so it's a rather sophisticated HVAC system, so elevators.
All right, so you don't have a list of things that you know is going to cost you close to 40 this coming year, that you came up with that number. You did it based on what you've spent
Over the last 6 years.
Yeah.
And I did go back through, like, all of the expenditures over the last, I would say, 6-ish years, probably more like 7.
Mhm.
And it averaged out to be like 39 and change.
Yeah.
So I just rounded to 40 because that,
Okay.
everything's gone up crazy.
Mhm.
This year, I mean, and I'm not, I can't guarantee that I would spend every penny of that, but, I wouldn't try to,
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I didn't know whether you already had a list in your head that you knew you were going to be expending this on.
Oh, sweet
No,
mother,
but-
no. I hope not. Last year, we had, the year before last, I think it just seemed like a lot of things broke.
Mhm.
And I hate to even put this out there, but we've had a pretty good year this year, but we're not
No,
done
I
with
do
the year yet.
Yeah, no, you came, I forget when it was, for a repair, replace of VFD,
Yep.
Yeah.
okay? For-
Yeah, we
for
had a power
$3,600.
surge. Actually, we did get, we had to repair 2 VFDs, as a matter of fact.
Mhm.
And one of them was as a result of a power surge, and we went after National Grid for that,
Okay.
and did get,
Mhm.
yeah, so.
Okay.
Well, the insurance company paid most of it, and then National Grid paid our deductible.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to pay for any
Yeah.
of it.
So,
All right.
so I asked for that. It doesn't mean that I'm gonna need it all, but
Yeah.
just based on history, I just don't, it would just mean that I would be coming before, FinCom more
Yeah.
to ask for unforeseen, it's really unforeseen, things.
Mhm. No, and I guess my comeback, at least my personal, would be if we have to work budgets, that might be one place, and then I would recommend, do like you did with the other parts, just come back and
Sure.
we'll fund what we have to. all right? I guess I look at that as low-hanging fruit, sorry.
I get it.
Okay, if we've got to make
I
some.
have to ask, though.
Yeah. I know, hey, we wouldn't know you'd need unless.
Right, exactly.
Any other questions of Karen or Stefan?
Nope.
While we got them?
It's well done.
Thank you so much.
I'll explain.
Would you like me to go through the 2 capitals?
Do we have that?
I think it's in the packet.
Oh, yes, the second, right.
that pink chart.
Yep,
I just gave you everybody's, because
Unless
that's
it
how it turns
changes.
out.
Yep,
Here you go.
okay.
Case you have insomnia.
No.
Oh, let's see here.
Yeah, they're on the first page there. This is that,
Down towards the bottom, I think, where it says,
this chart, Hank.
Oh, yeah,
I think it's like the second,
yeah,
We've got 'em. Here we
I
go.
got you.
that's everyone's capital for the year.
Yep.
They're on that first page at the
Yep.
bottom there.
so the first item is the second half of the roof gutter project. The first half was approved at town meeting, and we're awaiting the opinion of cost from the consultant. That was for the new part of the building. They're separate issues, but rather than go for $400,000 at a whack, Andrew had me split it up into two separate ones. So this is for the old part of the building, the 1904 structure. And the fire pond needs to have the cistern drained and the screens replaced in it. And, I mean, I'm making it sound very simple, but the quote we got was $70,500 from Cogswell. It requires divers and, and other things, yeah. And so, that is what supplies the water for our fire suppression system.
Okay.
They came in to do routine maintenance on that and were unable to do it because the screens were in such deplorable condition. They were literally falling apart, so they didn't want to touch them.
And suck all that stuff into your
And that's
pumps.
right, exactly. So, but we do have a quote on that from Cogswell.
Okay.
So those are the two capital requests.
Good. Again, any questions of Karen or Stefan?
Nope.
No, we're good?
Yep.
Thank you
Thank
very,
you.
very much.
Right on
Stefan,
time.
that's
We
the
can-
quietest I've ever seen you at a meeting in the years I've known you.
I was stepping on his toe and going.
I'm just here for the good looks.
He just wants to go out and see the satellites.
Right, right.
Did we get you out in time?
I hope so.
No, don't go by that clock, Stefan. We know that. That one's not right.
that one's right.
Oh, that one's right, that one's wrong. Okay. All right, Kurt, you're up. 5 minutes after I said, but you're still up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Haven't sat really before this board or this commission or whatever we are.
We're just a-
Committee, you're a
We're a
committee.
committee. We're a committee.
You're a committee for a number of years. It's sort of been, handled through the normal process. I provided in my early submittal a document outlining our requests, and just earlier this week, I provided an updated document that I know is in your package, and I highlighted in yellow all the revisions from the previous document so that we could
All right,
do
hold
that.
on, Kurt. Has everybody got that one? Ready?
Looks like this.
Yeah.
So the asks this year is to take our local inspector, Mr. Fenner, who's working part-time at 19 hours a week, to a full-time position of 37 and a half, whatever that number is a week. And this office joins with the Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and the Zoning Board of Appeals to hire a secretarial assistant. I've been asking for additional administrative assistance for the past 2 years, and, realizing that it takes a while to get there. This past year, the part-time zoning board clerk left employment with the town. The position was advertised. There were no takers. It's a 5-hour-a-week position, so getting someone to come in for 5 hours a week is probably not a, attainable goal. And we know in working with Mr. Golis, both the Conservation Commission and Planning Board have also looked, and what we're looking for this position to do is to be a very front-facing position, probably behind a renovated area in my office, to be a meet and greeter, a single point of contact for all of those departments to come in and get the paperwork started, deal with paperwork, deal with mailings and all that, so the staff that we have can concentrate on the heavier lifting. The rest of it is a dissertation on the increases in the number of permits we have, the long lead time that we've been experienced because Mr. Fenner, who I dedicate to doing residential work and I'm doing the commercial work and zoning, is sometimes taking 3 to 4 weeks to process permits. Now, of course, depending upon what that permit is on the residential side, it can go longer if the applicant does not provide the correct information or needs to provide additional information, but some stuff we get out right away, the easy, roofing and siding and those sort of
I was
things.
gonna say, so something as simple as a garage addition could take a month.
Could take a month, and that's, And then we also talk in here about the fees that my department generates. So we're pretty much, we could be self-supporting. Now, the industry guidance is that fees for a building department should satisfy 85% of the department's budget over a 5-year average, okay? We've lived through this. 2008, we went down to hardly any houses, fee income went down, but if we look at the trend over, constantly over the years, my department has brought in fees on the average year a little bit more, about $10,000 more than what it would cost us for salaries and
Okay.
expense. Does not include benefits, right? I didn't factor that into that. I mean, the town is gonna have to provide some to this because we do provide services to the citizens, and that's what they pay taxes for. But most of what we do is discretionary work, right? No one told you that you had to build a new house. No one told you that you needed to put an addition on, right? So we try and capture enough fees, and when I've structured the fees with the selectmen is that we try and capture the fees for the services rendered. There's a state law that says our fees must be reasonable for the services rendered. So we're falling in that. We're pulling in around $217,000 a year on average. Our, budget is a little under 200,000. I'm getting up to 200,000, 201,000 if this ask, except for the shared position, because that's not within my budget, and that hasn't been assigned to my budget. But just to run my office, I could, do it with the fees that we have. And we've had some extraordinary years the past couple of years. We've had an Amazon project which hasn't fully permitted out. We've had the LNG project that hasn't fully permitted out, pretty close. We've had rumors of some other major projects that haven't come to fruition, so those numbers are pretty substantial, and then they're in here. Amazon's building permit is about $1.2 million. And we've worked with them and worked with Ashley to space that out over some time to keep, so it's not one great big chunk coming in. We got a bunch of the money last fiscal year. We waited till this fiscal year to get another bunch of the money. And that's timed with work process. So the general thing is that residential permits are up 53% over a 5-year average. That includes an increase of inspections of up to 70% increase over the 5-year average. New homes are up 32% over the 5-year average. Pools are up 156%. Renovations, 104%. Solar and storage, yep, that's the thing. Home solar fields and home energy storage, 176%. So we're seeing some pretty hefty numbers on the residential side of stuff going on. And everybody I talk to, and I know our crystal ball, my crystal ball is as fuzzy as your crystal ball, and we all read the paper and different papers, and is there gonna be a downturn? My contractors aren't saying that.
No, huh?
No, they're not saying that. I know contractors got 2 houses, 2 lots that he's waiting to get through Conservation Commission to do that. Couple of permits came in already this month for new houses. It's sort of the slow season. They'll start to pick up soon. The stuff is coming in. You know, I think, you know, I'm as good as a financial advisor as my financial advisor and then those guys in the Wall Street Journal. I don't think it's that bad out there.
I guess I would tend to agree, probably.
I would agree.
I'm curious though, does it cost anything for some of these inspections? I know that assessors hired somebody to assess the Millennium Power Plant, because maybe it was a little bit past their expertise. In something like an Amazon or an LNG, do you go out and find third party?
I've told the guy the signature at the bottom line. Those two projects, both of them are of such caliber that for some things on the LNG project, Jensen Hughes, we've hired Jensen Hughes at the applicant's
Okay.
cost, direct cost, to perform plan review on structural stuff that I have no clue about. On the Amazon project, they're fully on board, third-party review required by the building code because of the project, what's going on in the project, and all through the project. I do not have the time nor the expertise to do all the inspections that need to be done. So they have a very special fire protection system, fire alarm system, and all that is also being done third-party by Jensen Hughes. I still go there.
But it doesn't cost us.
Applicant's cost.
Applicants,
Straight-
okay. I was
straight.
wondering, because I was asked that question.
Yeah.
How does Kurt know all about LNG and all this?
I don't. I talked to a lot of people and asked, you know, I mean, nuts and bolts are nuts and bolts.
Yeah,
But no, there's a lot of special stuff at LNG, and it's looked at by a lot of people. It's looked at by the siting board, it's looked at by the feds, it's held to a very high standard because of what it is. Amazon's performance-based design is held to a higher standard. But I'm still the guy on the ground. I go up there once a week, spend a couple hours a week walking around, seeing things, asking questions. We have a monthly meeting with the fire department, fire officials, and their team. We have one tomorrow, and our third-party inspector from Jensen Hughes is coming because we're getting to that point in the project where they need to be on the ground with us. And then that's all direct charge through escrow account,
okay.
that. You know, so if we look at some basic numbers, William, my local inspector, says, well, I spend about 25 minutes per inspection, and if we did 1,300 inspections last year, that's 541 hours. And his part-time position is only 988 hours. And that has got to cover all the other stuff, all the permit review and everything. Commercial, my side of the world, commercial permits are up 57%. Now, Amazon, lots of permits down in LNG because every building and every structure is a separate permit. New structures, 504%. We went from 5 commercial permits for the past 5 years to 29. Now, I'm telling you that there's like 5 major structures down at the LNG, them by themselves, you know, have
Yeah.
five permits.
I was gonna say, because driving around, I don't see that many construction sites.
Well, you don't, but, you know, there's a major brewery in town that's always doing something, okay? There's, you know, some solar stuff in the background, we've had a couple of smaller commercial buildings built, you know, a new gym studio that opened up in town here, right on Route 20. We have another building that's been cleared next to McClure has been permitted, so there's a few, you know, smaller things going on that, you know, that Amazon could swallow up. And renovations are up 110% on the commercial side. So that stuff is going on within people. Tenant fit out, tenant changes, that sort of thing. Fees collected, the 5-year average is $206,530. In FY '22, $736,000. FY '23 to date, $516,000. Now, we're not we charge a reasonable fee, and the reason I talk about this is because there's a frustration of some building officials, sometimes east of here, where their rate is $25 per thousand for a permit, we charge $6. And they have trouble getting support of their administration to staff their offices properly. It goes into the general fund, that's where it goes. And is that fair to the customer? I'm asking to provide enough help so that we're providing the services reasonable for the fees that we're collecting.
How often do you review your fees?
We went about 10 years that we sat, and we did them a couple years ago. We're looking, and internally, we're talking about some of our fees, like for solar and solar batteries, which is only $75, and it's become quite complex because of the changing technology behind it. We charge $1,300 for a new house, we charge $250 for a deck, and we set a limit on the number of inspections per event, because if we're charging $250 for a deck, then that's like three inspections. Okay, about $75 a piece, right? That's what the plumbing and gas inspectors get, right? Because then we've had some people, and I've had trouble with people, well, I got this one hole dug, I want you to come and look at it. And the next week, they want to come look at the next hole. You know, and it's like, yeah, there is some sequencing, we're accommodating to that, but you can't offer the service if you're not being compensated for it.
Okay.
The other thing that I want to touch on is I chair the municipal building committee, and we've talked about this for a year. We made an attempt a few years ago to hire someone to grow into a facilities maintenance guy. You heard the librarian talk about doing library maintenance. I'm still doing town hall maintenance. We had a boiler malfunction, heating system malfunction. I'm in here on a Saturday chasing technicians. The town of Charlton, like we went to a centralized HR person, like we went to an IT person, needs to get a facilities manager so department heads can do department work. And we can have people that are experts or more qualified to look at heating systems, to do the preventative maintenance so that we keep our repair costs down, because I don't think I have to tell anybody here, preventative maintenance, you know, the guy with the oil change, you can pay me now, or you can pay me later. And that needs to be seriously discussed.
Okay, so that's 3 people you're talking about?
I'm talking about,
One in the one
Two.
in the planning,
yeah, so,
Okay, and the-
build a full-time, okay, so we're going from part-time to full-time, so you get
All right, so
that.
it's 2.5.
Right, well, the facilities management guy is not my department.
He just does the work.
It belongs to Andrew, but I'm here to support that as the chairman of the municipal building committee that looks at a police chief calling me up saying, what do I do with my air conditioning system? You know, the roofing project that needed to be supervised at the police station, we self-contracted, self-performed that. And I went down once and looked while it was going on, and that's all I had time for. We've got a gutter project coming at the library that should have some oversight to it, besides the building official who's doing building inspections as opposed to a project manager who is making sure the project runs.
Okay. All right, so 2.5. You got anything else you want to?
I'm good.
Before we open it up to questions, any questions of Kurt? On either his department or the building?
Actually, one quick question, Kurt.
Yeah.
So the $6 per thousand, you said your permits are based on, what is that based on?
It used to be 5 and we went up to 6.
So nothing to do with cost base at all?
you know, we looked, right, whenever we do a fee increase, right, that the selectmen have say over, right? The selectmen are the authority here that sets the permit fees. So I look at what other towns are charging, I'm looking at what we have charged and what it's costing.
Good.
Okay, and $6 per thousand is reasonable to me. We could go to 10 if the selectmen agreed. You're putting is it a burden on the commercial contractor? Depends on who you talk to. For a $200 million project, another $250,000,
Yeah, I would say the commercial guys can burden it, regardless of the size of the project.
yeah. You know,
So,
But you get-
it's commercial,
right.
because you were saying before, it's 250 for deck and 13, so those are set fees, not based on the value of the house or the value of the deck, okay.
Or the project, and that's one of the things we're starting to look at as we get this data in. When a solar roof project with a battery is $60,000, that's what the applicants are putting on their application.
Yeah.
What is the cost of this? And we're charging $75 and expending 2.5 hours, 3 hours on one of these? But that's the information I'm gathering to go to the Board of Selectmen to say, this is why, you know, an in-ground swimming pool, $50,000, $100 permit fee, $150 permit fee. Now, I'm not saying we need to go out and extract blood from the customer, but, you know, the price, you know, and everything's going up. Okay, so I'm trying to strike a balance between, you know, there is some taxpayer, so roofing, siding, replacement windows, insulation, weatherization, stuff like that, that we permit at a low number, $100, okay, is because the law and the regulations say we have to permit it, right? It's for your protection as a customer, it's for us to help you with it, okay? Those are maintenance things. They are not as discretionary as putting that swimming pool in the ground that you know, is a choice. Okay? We want people to permit things so that things are done safely and correctly. You know, I've had people tell me, well, I don't want to get a roofing permit because my taxes are gonna go up. I take the principal assessor out with me all the time. We've had all these discussions. You need a roof on your building. It's not going to change the tax value of your building. You know, putting replacement windows in there, yeah, if the building's falling apart and, you know, it might go up the Sears thing, you know, good, better, best, because there is that in assessing, from my understanding. You know, what is the fit and finish level? You know, if I have wall-to-wall carpet or I have all hardwoods, that changes the value a little bit. Same thing with kitchens. Kitchens, $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 kitchens. We're charging $200. Is there a lot of work involved in it? Not usually. But so that's the balance. That's what I look at when, you know, how much effort are we putting into getting this done right? And is the $75 for a solar rooftop and battery that ends up taking 3 inspections, and we charge for re-inspections at $50 a pop. But we're generous about that, so, you know.
Are you putting something together for the Board of Selectmen?
I'm gonna be working on it. I got through this part here, you know. I'm not after raising the fees to justify this, but I'm after making sure the fees are covering 85% or more of the department expense.
No, it sounds like the Worcester tax rate. Residents down here, businesses up here, to make the businesses pay that.
Yeah. Yep, exactly what they do.
Hank, I have a question, if
Yes.
you don't mind.
Yeah.
The part-time employee going full-time, the number in here, is that fully loaded, inclusive of any kind of additional? It's not, so we need to consider that somewhere?
Benefits goes into a separate part of the budget.
Okay,
So
but there
yes.
is an additional
There would be,
implication, I
yeah, 'cause
guess,
he's
is
not
I'm
benefited
pointing
now.
out. Okay,
It's usually like, we say like 30 grand to benefit somebody.
Yeah,
Something like
we
that.
base it off of them taking full family.
Yeah,
yeah,
All benefits.
yeah.
okay, just something for us to remember.
Ashley, what does that, is there a question I can't?
No,
Oh, okay.
I pulled it up on my phone too, so I cannot, but no, there's nothing there.
Because we do take questions from home. correct?
Oh, that's
Anybody
fine.
wants to get on,
Yeah.
anybody, anything else they want to ask Kurt while we got him? Come on, we only get them once a year, get them now.
I'll come back. I mean, I don't mind, you know, it's just that there has, you know, I've asked for you know, the administrative help, you know, it became apparent that I really needed, and we've had part-time inspection help, you know. I understand where you guys are sitting on the other side, you know, okay, well, you get the part-time inspector, okay, the administrative help.
Through the chair,
Yes.
one question, because the last time you were here, I think it was for your truck. If that employee goes from part-time to full-time, you're gonna come back for another truck?
No, I don't need it. You know, we can work that, and we work it now. He comes in Monday, Wednesday, and Friday mornings and does inspections, and I stay in the try and stay in the office and be available Monday and Wednesday morning, and I work my 40 by the end with the rest of the town hall staff, so Friday's not a problem. You know, occasionally, we may both need to be someplace. I'll take my truck, he'll take his truck, and we've, you know, gained another vehicle out here that, you know, we can share, you know, in cooperation with conservation and planning. You know, if I was really desperate, the black cars out there that Jeff from IT has resurrected and has got it going again, so he can run around between buildings. So no, I'm not gonna come and say, yeah, we need to increase the fleet.
Good thought. Anything else, Kurt? There being nothing, thank you, Kurt.
Thank you very much. Have a
Yeah.
nice evening.
Thank you. All right. All right. We're only 15 minutes behind, guys. Come on up. I noticed you guys started your meeting right on time, and you had everybody right on time. I apologize, we couldn't do the same for you tonight.
Jacobs, how are you?
You're doing well, how you doing? Good. Thank you.
How you doing? Good. It's all right. Thank you.
So again, guys, if you would introduce yourself to the newer members of our committee.
Yes, there are a few new faces. My name is Stephen Lamarche, Superintendent for the Dudley Charlton Regional School District.
Rich Matthew, Director of Finance and Operations for the region.
And as you will see soon, okay, Rich puts together one of the better presentations of all the people that come before us. He's good at this.
Superintendent Lamarche is a PowerPoint user.
I don't put a lot of the jazz in there, but I try to get the information and try to keep it as simple as possible as well. So, good evening. We appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you, as we do annually. We appreciate the time of Mr. Kamasi for coming to our all boards meeting as well and hearing much of this presentation this evening. And our work continues both here in Charlton and in Dudley. You know, as a matter of fact, we met with the town administrator this morning in Dudley for a couple of hours with the work that's ahead of us in that community, but we know there's a lot of work in this community as well. So we are going to provide you information. There's a little bit of update from the last time that we presented this. Things seem to move pretty fast within our world. So without further, I'm going to just jump right into it. The slides are numbered, and sometimes I do tend to talk fast, so if I'm talking too fast, just slow me down or anything at all. Okay? So if you look at, I'm jumping already to page 3. This is what we present in our budget, and I know this is familiar language for all. We get to a certain point where when we start identifying things that we want as a priority within the budget, we have to identify things that we have to take out to balance the budget. We have a responsibility of balancing a budget on an annual basis, so it's not as simple as just adding things back in. Looking at slide 4, these assumptions and risks. So yesterday afternoon, I attended a legislative luncheon, and our local representatives and senators were there. It was great, or representatives of them were there, so it was great to hear some of the conversation. Obviously, there was no walkaway to say we guarantee this is going to occur, but there were a couple of things that we can work on within this particular category that we're paying close attention to. One of them, which isn't really in here, but certainly impacts us as a district, is offering a universal lunch for students. There was a question as to whether that was going to end in March. Our understanding is that is going to be for the remainder of this year. Our also understanding after yesterday is that the legislative group is really committed to and serious about having universal lunch for all students moving forward as a permanent decision. That's not done, but there was certainly, out of all of the topics that we talked about, that was one of the things that there seemed to be a lot of consensus within the room for the legislators to express to us. That certainly has a huge impact on us as a district moving forward. One of the other things, the first one, Chapter 70, we are still a hold harmless district, even though the gap is closing a little bit on that. Our assumption is that we're going to receive minimum aid, as we have since 2009. There is talk about trying to, with the new governor, raise it to $100 per student versus $30 per student, but that's just talk. We have nothing, and we won't have our numbers to give you final numbers as a community until at least we were somewhat promised, without the governor's voice, that March 4th would be the date that we would get the governor's budget. Typically, it's sooner than that. It's the end of January we typically get it. So March 4th, we're hoping to have those numbers so we can try to solidify some of these rounder numbers on some of our sheets, okay?
Yeah, explain to those that may not know the percentage of state aid versus local aid that you're dependent on. What is Chapter 70 money? How much do we get out of our school budget?
The rough numbers are in the 50% range.
50%.
I always look at it as roughly 50% comes from the state, 50% comes from the two communities, and the two communities have been fairly evenly divided, 52-48, 53-47 over the last few years.
Okay.
So it's just let's call it just under $30 million.
Yeah.
Is what the state provides us
Right.
for our district.
I just want everybody to understand why it's hard for you to finalize your budget until naturally the state finalizes theirs.
Yes, and we're hoping that there is a kick up from the $30 per student, which we did have going into this fiscal year, but we're not sure, we can't make that assumption in running our numbers at this point in time until we have a better idea of that.
So this document we have before us is based on $30 per student?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And everything else under the sun,
Yeah.
as what we know now. Excess and deficiency, we know that this is stable, working for fiscal year '24. Depending upon where we go with our assessments, including the override in Dudley and with Charlton, we could be tapping into, now, you have to understand the excess and deficiency fund, a regional district can capture up to 5% of their operating budget in excess and deficiency to offset one-time costs. So I'm just going to say it the way that I understand it best. We've never been close to 5% ever as a regional district, ever. And in fact, we use it, we have a fiscal cycle that is probably not what you would call a healthy fiscal cycle. We count on E&D to offset our operating budget every year. So it's like you using stabilization to offset your operating budget every year. That's what we're doing with the E&D every year. So the more we tap into that, or we expend all of that, so again, we will have to expend more, and you'll see this in the presentation, moving forward, if our assessments aren't supported, we won't, I can sit here today and tell you FY25, we will not have that offset of over $1 million in our operating budget, which means it's a compounding assessment or compounding increase in FY25. But right now, we are confident that we are coming in with excess and deficiency stable to continue to offset FY24 at over $1 million. Okay? Rebid the transportation. We are happy to say that actually worked in our favor. We did have a transportation bid go out, and our school committee took the extraordinary step, which is a risk, and said we should go out to bid again and see if we can take that initial fee, which was $500,000, and see if we can spread it out over time. Last time we presented that was our goal. It actually came to fruition. We actually did receive a bid that was lower, right on target, to be able to spread that cost over. So it didn't change what we have in here because we already presented that was our goal, that number, but it certainly worked in our favor to be able to do that. We believe school choice and charter assessments will be stable for FY24, meaning that we don't see an increase in students going to charter or school choicing out of our district. So we believe that will be stable for next year. We did have an increase of $100,000 fee for that last year. I already know that there's been a number of charter school students that have come back to our district this year. So I do believe that that's going to be stable for us going into the next fiscal year. State reimbursements remain stable for FY24. This was probably garnered a lot of discussion at the legislative luncheon yesterday. Transportation was not part of the conversation, but regionals suffer the most when there's a fluctuation in reimbursement for transportation. As you may be aware, regional districts were always promised 100% reimbursement for transportation. It's never ever been 100% reimbursement, and it's sometimes fluctuated. It's also been part of 9C cuts in the past, where the governor can just cut it. So transportation is always a volatile reimbursement. All of these are can be volatile reimbursement rates because it's by appropriation. It's not set in legislative regulation that you're going to get 100% of whatever we say for reimbursement. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Circuit breaker, this is the one that received a lot of discussion because you'll see in this presentation that the Office of Operations Services Division, OSD, that's how I know it. OSD did permit, for the state of Massachusetts, did permit out-of-district specialized schools for students with significant needs to increase their tuition rates by 14%. 14%. Every district across the state is struggling with that. And this was garnered a lot of conversation yesterday. We're looking for relief from our legislators on that because for us alone as a district, that's a $430,000 increase right on top, no matter what. It's a brand new bill of $430,000. So there was a lot of discussion around that, if the state could come up with pothole money for the year to help us transition into that 14% increase for one fiscal year to get to FY25. And then wrapped into that was a whole discussion around circuit breaker, because circuit breaker is it's a trailing reimbursement for costs. So no matter what, we have to put out the costs in one fiscal year, we get reimbursed in the following fiscal year in circuit breaker. So there was discussion about increasing circuit breaker reimbursement up to 90%. It's traditionally around 70, if not lower. Again, tough. I go back to FY 2009. I mean, there were reimbursements, I want to say in the 40s, 40%. For circuit breaker. So it's fluctuated, but let's for this discussion, let's say it's around 70%. There's a lot of discussion about moving it to 90% reimbursement because of the 14% increase, which is, they're all tied together. But that's a trailing reimbursement that we can't apply that to our FY24 budget. Okay. And we're hoping that our Medicaid funding continues to be stable, and our McKinney-Vento, which is for homeless students in our district, remains somewhat stable. But again, it's never reimbursement for 100% of the cost for us as a district. So if we expend $100, we may only get $60 back on that, just to be clear. And our ESSER funding is stable for one more fiscal year. There has been some discussion that there'll be an extension on that. I don't know what people are thinking. I don't know where that's coming from. I've not read anything. I've not heard anything. I can't sit here and believe that in one way, shape, or form that there'll be an extension or additional ESSER funding coming forward from the federal government. So we're stable for FY24, but it's done after FY24. So the next slide, slide 5, this was when we presented the other evening. This slide talked about the increased needs of our students. Certainly COVID and the pandemic has certainly exacerbated a lot of needs for our students moving forward, interrupted learning. You know, I'm here and comfortable saying that you know, the length of time that we had students in their homes and asked parents to be teachers, counselors, and all that, which they love their children, that's not the question, but we're asking them to be the teacher on top of it. And, you know, we understand that there is a dynamic relationship between a teacher and a parent and a student and all of that. We're getting more and more needs as we transition back. So coming back was a relief that we're back, but the needs of our students is just skyrocketing across. It's not just us. This is not just a Dudley Charlton thing. This is across our state in every way. So if you look on this particular slide, slide 5, We have significant increases in the students that require services and support within our particular district. And then the second bullet, which is the one that we feel the most, and you're seeing more recent literature on this, is that the childcare system, the childcare business, the early intervention systems, all of that have not rebounded since COVID. So a lot of those interventions that happen early that really help a student access teaching and learning early on have been compromised in such a way that we are owning all of that with students coming into our system at pre-K, first grade. Those systems, early intervention, which are not ours, they're either private or state, have just not rebounded in such a way. So we've identified that with a lot of our students coming into our system. So on slide 6, which we talked about this, we continue to add fixed costs as we know them now. We continue to work on this. This is not a one presentation and we're done with our numbers. We don't have to look at them again. That's never the case. And then on the left-hand side, I talked about cost savings initiatives. How do we try to find savings within our budget? This is a reoccurring discussion administratively at multiple levels with Mr. Matthew. Captured savings and cost avoidance, and I'm going to try to give you a couple of examples of that. Cost savings initiatives for us as a district, and you were just talking about here, benefits. And Mr. Matthew can certainly speak more, the district, and I give Mr. Matthew a ton of credit for this, has really moved our health insurance into a very, I'm going to use the word, it's going to sound funny, but a healthy program for our staff, but also fiscally for our staff as well. I don't know if you wanted to touch upon that a little bit.
Sure. The joint consortium that we were able to create with the towns of Webster and Douglas really paid a benefit for the first 4 years of existence. And this past year, we actually expanded so that we now have, I believe, 7 or 8 total members. And as the group continues to grow, that helps to lower our costs, are those joint costs. We're still self-insured through the group. All of the accounting is by individual district, community. So it really is the best of all worlds. It's an individual plan within a larger group, so shared expenses are shared between everybody, instead of just being borne by one district or one community.
And for a number of years, I know this is my 4th year, for a number of years we've certainly benefited budgetarily for that with some manageable increases to health insurance. When you're looking at the sizable increases in the costs we have associated with this year, every dollar counts, and so it's going to feel like it's a little bit more than we've experienced in the past, but I still think if all things were great, it would still be a manageable increase in itself. So credit to the district and to school committee and to Mr. Matthew for joining that. That was prior to my coming into the district. Captured savings, the example I gave the other night, and I'll give it again, is we always look for ways to capture savings within our budget. It's not as simple as saying we've allotted this much money for this particular thing, therefore that's what it is, and we accept that. We continue to work on it. An example I gave is that we typically go out, as you do with public entities, you go out for bid with a consortium or a group, and one of the things that was skyrocketing for us was paper. We go through pallets of paper as a school district with 3,600 students. If you count all of our substitutes, 750 staff members, we go through a lot of paper. Well, the bid that came back, the cost was, it ballooned. It just felt like it was just way out of control is my word. And then so Mr. Matthew pulled us from the bid and did some comparative shopping, and we found paper for much less. And so we jumped out of so that's an effort to capture savings within our particular budget. If we can buy 5 versus 10, we try to do that. We try to capture those savings within our particular budget. The last one is cost avoidance, and Kurt gave a great example of cost avoidance. Now, cost avoidance doesn't always begin with, the dollars. It begins with how do we avoid the cost down the road. So we use this term a lot in our district. So if we have a special program that supports students that we would normally send for out-of-district placement, that's a form of cost avoidance. If we could buy our specialized transportation in our district down the road, that's cost avoidance down the road. A lot of these things that we talk about always have an initial cost to them. So we're not in a position where we can do more cost avoidance by putting in an initial cost to reap the benefits of avoiding the costs in the future. But the one example we'll give you is the support that we've had over the past couple of years is we hired a public facilities, director of public facilities, and we're with the two roof projects. Acting as our OPM, he is paying for his salary for 5 years, because it would be hundreds of thousands of dollars to have the OPM. It's why we were able to bring in the roof projects at the value we brought them in. And again, that was a form of cost avoidance down the road. We certainly didn't have to go with a public facilities guy. Kurt gave a great example of that. But what would be the benefit of that? You wouldn't be avoiding costs down the road if the gutters don't get installed the right way you want them to get installed, because somebody isn't there overseeing it as a project manager. So that's cost avoidance, and we try to look for those within our budgetary process as well. Slide 7, I continue to be asked, what is ESSER paying for? This is obviously for every district a funding cliff. We'll have to reprioritize this or try to find ways to put it in the operating budget. There's no guarantee all of this goes into the operating budget. The ESSER funds was supposed to support a return from interrupted learning and what that would look like. You'll see that we have a lot of support in here for the needs of our students. This is not classroom teachers. This is the support. This is the things around the classroom to support those children coming back into our environment. So on slide 7, that's what you have an accounting for the ESSER funds for FY24 moving forward. We have to stop moving some of this stuff to our operating budget. We've minimally tried that within this particular FY24 budget, but the rest of this we have to figure out a way to either put it in the operating budget through assessments moving forward, or find just what I said earlier in the first slide. What are we going to reduce to add? It just has to be one of those two things. Okay?
And I'm sorry, you're saying that this probably won't be available in '25, or you just
Yeah.
don't know, but?
My strong belief is it won't be, but other people are trying to start conversations that it will be, but
The grant was meant to cover fiscal years 23 and 24.
Okay.
So looking on slide 8, this is where the level service budget information comes in, and I've had to make an adjustment here, and it's hard for me to share this adjustment. But getting into fiscal year '24 is a large ask, just for paying the bills. So, for example, our contractual obligations are $1.2 million. Our contractual obligations typically are around $1 million on an annual basis. They're 1.2. We did settle a contract last year with our largest union, the teachers union. It certainly was a little bit higher than the district has done in the past, but not, I don't think, outlandish compared to what I've seen out there in other places. The first year was 2.5, and it's 2.7, 2.7. So this year was 2.5, next year is 2.7. Again, I don't think it's, I've seen requests, if you look at, across other communities that where teachers are striking, I mean, they're looking at 14% increases, 12% increases. I think that our union has done an extremely good job of working with us and us working with them to come in with a reasonable, fair contract moving forward, but there is a cost to that. And instead of the average around $1 million per year, we're at $1.2 million for that. Our transportation, as we talked about, this hasn't changed because this was our target. Our target was $400,000 for yellow bus transportation. We were able to come in with that. And then the increase for specialized transportation is $150,000, which is much higher than we anticipated it would be for this fiscal year.
That's what you highlighted in yellow?
Yeah, I'm getting that, yeah. Okay. Out of district placements, the $430,000 was the initial 14% increase that I talked about. But as of today, we learned of 2 potential additional out-of-district placements at a minimum value of $225,000. One student was a re-enrollment into our district, and we're looking for a sizable placement for that particular student. And another student is just exceeding her needs. We were making progress with that particular student, but the student is exceeding our abilities at this point in time. The progress has ended, and it's going back in a more difficult way, without getting into too much detail. But you could probably guess what Mr. Matthew and I look like today when we received this information.
Which occurred during a budget meeting to try to reduce other areas of the budget to help with the overall budget. And
This covers transportation to a school, the tuition to that school, whatever other.
Yes, and it will fall into circuit breaker, but that's a lagging reimbursement, so we have to come up with the money up front. So employee benefits insurance, this is the stuff, as Mr. Matthew just indicated, we've been working on numbers and budgets and trying to continue to refine these numbers. We're going to work very hard to see if we can do something within this particular category with our benefits, but as you, even as a town, have experienced, like the Worcester County Retirement System, their increases went up. You have to keep in mind, as a regional school district, we take care of all benefits of our district. Yeah, and that includes retirees. We have over 300 retirees that we're responsible for as a district. So we manage all of that, and we take care of all of those benefits, health insurance benefits. We work through the retirement systems. But, that is, we're not down from 500 yet, but we're working hard to try to come in with those numbers. Mr. Matthew spends an inordinate amount of time with with Mass Strategic Health to try to understand where that's going. He doesn't control the actual numbers of it, but he's part of a group, so he's working hard on that. Utilities, we all know the cost of utilities have gone up, so that's a reasonable increase given what electricity costs nowadays, but we're powering 7 schools. And we're trying to do everything we can to try to lower the cost of electricity. We do have a software system that shuts computers off at 6 o'clock at night. Our custodians have, at Shepherd Hill especially, have put in, as we saw through the tour, they put in store-bought sensors to shut off lights in the classroom if nobody's in there. There are things that people are trying to do, but it's tough to conserve electricity in 7 schools that are, Shepherd Hill alone is used. I'm there till 10 o'clock at night and feel like I'm leaving early because our schools are used quite often, especially at the secondary level and our gymnasiums and stuff.
Are there any grants for solar out there that might be over?
There could be. We could come up with a school building project or something of that nature, but it's not. We've been working with our Joe Karen, our director of public facilities, on that as well, but there isn't anything to grab at this point in time. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
As we look at the middle school roofs, the design will be suitable for adding solar panels if we decide to go that route. There'll still need to be an engineering study to be done to ensure that structurally they can support the weight. But we always think about that. We for many years have talked about, okay, is there an ideal place to put a solar farm? Is there an ideal place to do something? And it seems like roofs are the preferred method.
And for any MSBA, acronyms, I'm losing my acronyms, sorry. MSBA, they will have you try to entertain whether solar is part of your project or not. They don't really do a lot of reimbursement on the solar, but they do reimbursement on all of the tie-ins for it and stuff of that nature. Because you typically run into some contract with a solar vendor, and MSBA doesn't get involved in that. The next one, instructional technology, we already indicated and shared that this $300,000 is to get into a new cycle of technology within our particular district. Last year was the last year on a lease-to-purchase payment. That started in 2017. So we're now looking at the cycle to start moving into it. This is highlighted because this is what a lot of our meeting was today. How can we scaffold it? How can we structure it in a different way? What can we add to the lease within our budget that we didn't think we could add to the lease and still receive some reimbursement through E-rate for? We spent a long time on this today. This is $300,000 for a lease program to get into buying so that our technology stays up to date is where this is. And the timing is poor. Because we just finished our lease to buy last year. And as we go down the road, we are looking at an end of life for anything that's not Windows 11, and most of our devices, our desktop devices, it can't be supported by that. So we are trying to, and we can't just all of a sudden buy 1,000 of them and ask our small technology department to roll them out. So we have to stage it, and we're trying to look for ways to do that. So I can't guarantee that we have savings here, but we're trying to scaffold it in such a way that this may spread the cost out versus having $300,000 in FY24. Yes, please.
So yeah, the goal in this particular area is to try to find the sweet spot of a sustainable budget without the peaks and valleys. If you've got to go out and buy 300 computers in 1 year, maybe you can spread those costs so that the budget isn't doing this. And the technology department and the technology budget has historically been fairly limited. I'll remind the communities that at Shepherd Hill we got Wi-Fi in 2016. That's not yesterday, but it's really not all that long ago for a technology that's been around for a while now.
And then restoration position, it's really one position in ESSER transition, again, starting that transition out of ESSER, that over $1 million of ESSER funding into FY25, we have to start the process. That's a value of $105,000 out of the million, and $45,000 to try to restore a position back in our district office. It was a data position. You have to understand the way the state works and the way our finances work. It's really contingent on our data and our accuracy of our data. We've had limited Band-Aid approach to doing that this particular year. We're feeling the pressures of that, and our office is feeling the pressures of that. So that's a $45,000 value to add that back into our district office that we cut last year. So that's the next slide. The restore district office support, $45,000, transition from ESSER. And then our principals, we meet with our principals every year, and we build the budget from the bottom up, and we try to figure out what is needed. These are things that have come up not only from our principals, but also in discussions with our school committee and the community, looking for an additional elementary special education coordinator for our district. At one point in time, there was a team chairperson in all 7 schools. We went to special education coordinators I think the year I started was the first year of that. And that was a shared role between buildings, but with the increased needs of our students and caseloads, we have like a special ed coordinator who's responsible for 192 IEPs within our district, and that's just way too much to try to manage as a special education coordinator. So we can't add that in as an additional, these things aren't being added into our budget. So we have to figure out a different way to try to approach it, but these are some of the requests, again, that were identified as priorities that we can't put into our particular budget. Additional foreign language and librarian at the middle school level, and IT support within our IT department. So again, $150,000 represents trying to restore one position in the district office and try to transition some of the positions out of ESSER into our operating budget. So on page 10, again, this is as of now, what our fiscal year 2023, which we appreciate the support of the community of Charlton, and what the difference is for FY24. So FY23 was $53,159,803. Just the fixed costs that I shared with you alone, $3.6 million. That's a 6.8% increase on the operating budget, with only. And I know we talk about we don't add new positions. I want to clarify that because you'll see that we in here that we have regulatory positions. That's based off of student needs. So if we have students with significant disabilities that need additional support, which if you watched one of our school committee meetings, we just added additional paraprofessionals because we have students that have additional needs. In our Charlton Elementary School, we had to add a second program because we were overpopulated in one program. So we had to add additional support for that as well. Those are what I call regulatory positions. They're required positions. It's not something that we're going out and saying we'd love to have this particular position within our district, a community liaison position or communication, or a lot of districts do a PR position, things of that nature. That's not what this is all about. Those are regulatory positions based off of student needs that we are required by DESE's regulation to have the proper staffing and support for those particular students. So I just wanted to be clear about that. We have put positions in, but we're not adding positions that, the district would certainly like to propose, like additional foreign language, a librarian at all schools, things of that nature. So a level service budget for FY24 is $56,824,803. We know that is unbelievable. We know that. So, so we're going to start walking into the override in Dudley, and Dudley has had a fiscal structural stress for a long time now, for a number of years now. It goes back to the original, in which we appreciate again the support of Charlton for the original override that happened in 2017, 2018, which to me, anything that I've read and saw was considered an override of survival that particular year. That's what it was actually called, an override of survival. And it added additional funds, and again, we greatly appreciate the support of both communities for that. It also provided $1 million for technology upgrades within our particular district as well, and that was a lot of the rewiring or wiring in our schools. I joked about how old I'm getting because nobody remembers what Net Day was. a number of years ago, but that was where all these volunteers came in and wired schools. You know, you hand them a drill, you hit them a corner, you tell them the corner of the room, and you drill into the wall, and you pull the Cat 5 through. So that $1 million in 2018 helped rewire the schools and remove some of that volunteer effort that was done as technology outgrew the volunteer wiring projects. So. It did provide reduction avoidance, as we talked about cost avoidance. It did provide that because there were certainly a number of staff members in budget reductions that were going to have to occur if that override did not come in those particular years. And it only added, and only a tough word, but it only added 4 positions to the district. Those positions are still in place, technology integration specialists and school adjustment counselors. And that's what the 2018 override did. Now, I know there's a discussion, 2 years, 3 years, what have you, and that's not what I want to get into at this point in time. But what I do know when I go back and read all of the information is the presentations really included that the school district, in order to stay level service, is going to need to look for a 3% budget increase on an annual basis. That's an operating budget increase. It's not an assessment increase. And therefore, you'd have to revisit this fiscal structure again at some point in time. So let's go with the 2 or 3. We're now 6 years away from that. We all did reap the benefits of ESSER money to come in and help us with that, but we're now back to revisiting what the fiscal structures are for our communities to support our schools. And the town of Dudley is not only looking for that to help support the schools, but they're also looking for it to support their own community. So it is an override for both the schools and for the town coming forward. I'm often asked the question about, what have we done to reduce our costs? And the typical model is that when somebody retires, you don't fill the position, you move the widgets around. That's still in play. That's not, we can't avoid that. It's just like the E&D. We can't sit there and fill those positions, but it's also part of that captured savings. How can we look at it from that perspective as well? But there are other positions that we've reduced within our particular district since I've been here, since FY21, and that's totals over $1 million of reductions of salaries within our district since FY21. The one that I think people miss the most and seem to point to, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, is the assistant superintendent. We never had one. Why do we need one? Please keep in mind that we always had a director of curriculum in our office. We also had a director of STEAM in our office. Those 2 positions were combined to make the assistant superintendent, which means it was a reduction of $40,000 to $50,000 for that expense. That's how the assistant superintendent came to fruition. I think people continue to miss that and forget that we took 2 positions, combined them into 1 to make the assistant superintendent. So there was a reduction in that process. I think that's missed. I think the assistant superintendent position is an easy target. So I just, from all the circles and discussions that I've been in around budgets and budget reductions. So this gets to I know it's been a serious conversation so far, but this gets to the real serious part of the conversation is if there is not an override or support for the assessments this year, again, we're still working to try to finalize the assessment, especially when the governor's numbers comes out. But if that doesn't happen right now, we have to plan for 2 budgets. We have to plan one that we have support for the assessments and for the override, another if we don't. And so the budget we have to prepare without is a $2.7 million reduction of our district. And once again, I'll reiterate, that means if we have to do that, there is no limited E&D for FY25. So that's, again, you have to think of that as compounding. That's another additional $1 million than whatever is asked for in FY25. We have to move to what's strictly required and compliant. So we've worked hard through the interrupted learning to develop what we call Tier 2 support systems, and that's outside of the classroom to support the student before we go from A to Z. A is a general education setting, to Z being that we're providing specialized instruction, special education, other support. There are layers that we can add in there to try to mitigate somebody's interrupted learning, to have them return back to the general ed setting without going to special education. So we've invested in a lot of that's reading specialists, that's Title I, that's all these things which we're trying to strategize around all of that to do. That's also the investment into our curriculum. Seek common knowledge, common core, common knowledge, Common Core is a slip, common knowledge from years, for literacy at our elementary level. Those are things that we're investing in for Tier 2 to try to prevent that going from one to the other. But when you make reductions, we continue to circle around the classroom. What are we going to pick? We're going to classroom teacher or the support? We have to. It's kind of a strange balance. We have admin recommendations for reductions to get to 2.7. But as an administrative team, we could only come up with $2.1 million without getting into some bigger categories. And so we did bring to our school committee, we're looking for guidance on where to go to find an additional over $500,000 for reductions within our particular district. No matter what, if you're reducing 2.7 out of Dudley Charlton, will forever change the experience of our students in Dudley Charlton, period. It will. There's no question, there's no hesitation on that comment. When I presented the other night, I had devastating in there. It will be both. It will forever change and it will be devastating.
But just not to criticize your presentation, but you've got the 2.7 in red.
Yeah.
Like it's a reduction in your budget.
Yeah.
That is just a smaller increase in your budget.
No. If we
Am I
don't.
misreading it then?
Yes, if we don't have the override or support for the assessments
Yeah.
to pay our bills, we have to reduce our budget, we're responsible for balancing the budget.
Yeah.
We have to reduce it by 2.7 million. We have to reduce our budget by 2.7 million.
Okay.
So it's no longer a level service budget, it's a level funded budget.
So it's a $6,300,000 swing, is what you're saying from the way I'm reading it.
It's almost the same values, and the reason why it's different values is because the reason why it's not reducing our budget by 3.6 million to pay the bills is because we're not including utilities in there. That's gonna come out of E&D. That's why E&D will be exhausted for FY '25, and we're gonna not have technology. We're gonna take technology out of the hands of our students.
Okay.
Because how else do you reduce $2.7 million out of our budget? How else do you reduce 3.6? What I'm trying to say is you can't even get to we struggle to get to 2.1. I don't know how we get to $3.6 million reduction.
Without the override.
Without the override from the town of Dudley and support for the assessments.
Okay.
And the reason for that is if the override is not successful in Dudley, at best, they can level fund, not level service, level fund us from fiscal '23 to fiscal '24. As a result, we can't change our assessment to Charlton very much at all. So we don't expect much new revenue, so we expect basically a level funded budget. And as a result of the bills that are fixed in, we can't cut 10 more buses. Trust me, if we could, we would, but we can't. We can't eliminate health insurance. So there are certain things that are just fixed. They're baked into the cake.
Okay.
Yeah, to go back, we appreciate Charlton, supporting and approving a budget that was higher, but remember, you're tied, Dudley and Charlton are tied together. So whatever that assessment is, you can't, even if you wanted to, you can't give us more money to try to prevent a massive reduction of $2.7 million.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Didn't that happen last year where we were able to
Yep.
fund a little higher and then Dudley came in lower and so they had to return money?
Mhm.
Remember that?
Yeah,
But, yeah, it just sits in their budget, so it goes
Right,
into free cash at the end of the year. We moved it at town meeting
Right, so
into our utility.
we're sort of,
Right.
you know,
they
limited
went
by
up.
whatever Dudley does. Yeah.
Yep. I don't know if you heard, the money was moved
Right,
moved to utilities,
Right, right.
to cover utilities
Yeah.
costs.
Just explaining, we can only do what Dudley does.
So does that make sense why we're looking at a reduction? Yeah.
We set our budget first, our town meetings before Dudley's.
Right.
So as an administrative team, we tried to come up with, how do we get to 2.7 million? Again, we can't, it was struggled to get to 2.7, 2.1, never mind 3.6. So, again, we're gonna exhaust E&D, we're not gonna buy technology, that automatically brings it from 3.6 to 2.7 million dollars. But if you look, we were looking for values. Again, I'm not going to be specific because we're still working on the details of this. This takes a lot of work. It's not as simple as saying these 8 people or these 8 teachers or these 8 programs or these 8 classrooms are going to be reduced out of Shepherd Hill. The example I gave at school committee the other night is it's easy to sit here and say, yeah, one from every department, but that's not how it works. Our schedule is really based off of student interests and what students select for their courses. Even though we would be moving more towards the compliant and what's required for courses, and obviously we'd be skinnying down the electives and the choices for kids for electives, we still rely on their input for what those courses look like. So I can't sit here and tell you that it's these 8 classrooms or these 8 subjects or what have you. The one above it was the district office. We're just going to decimate our office. We just are. The assistant superintendent's going to have to be cut, and we're going to have to look for 2.4 other in our office. It's not fair to ask all of our programs in schools to look at reducing to 2.1 without affecting the district office. Middle schools, and I did identify a couple of things here, just so that people are aware what our discussions are. Middle schools, we look at seven full-time equivalent positions in middle school athletics. You have the value of what these are, estimated values on the right-hand side. Elementary schools, 8 full-time equivalent in the library assistants, which has been a discussion on an annual basis. In special education, I want to caution you, this is a reduction of 5.0. Again, you can't leave any department untouched when you're looking at reducing $2.1 million, but that 5.0 could easily swing to 10, needing 10 tomorrow. It's not as simple as saying, because those are regulatory positions, is what I call them. So that leaves a balance of $580,000 for reduction. And again, if anyone has any, we've always been welcome. If people have ideas as to where the reductions can come from other than these, we'll certainly look at them, process them, and get back to people to see if we can make it work.
I'm still trying to figure out how you get your money, not how you spend your money, okay? That's a process in and of itself.
And then to continue to get to the $580,000, this is the list that we've provided to school committee to say we need some guidance because we don't have anywhere else to go. School committee has a goal of class size. We'd have to increase our class sizes. That could yield some savings. Now, every one of these has a different value. The goal is to get to 580, but where would we go with these to get to 580? We could cherry pick, take pieces from here, pieces from there. After the school committee meeting, I took the liberty of listening to the school committee and crossing out things that they thought were, they seemed to vocalize without votes that were non-negotiable. One was half-day kindergarten. It certainly yields a savings, but it's a 20-year step back for us as a district. They're saying that's non-negotiable, that can't be on this list. We're not here to support going back to half-day kindergarten. And the reason why half-day kindergarten is on there is if we move to what's required and being compliant, full-day kindergarten is not required by our state. It's not. So that's why that's on the list initially. Eliminate Shepherd Hill or middle school activity stipends. These are non-athletic and non-music. These are clubs, organizations, groups. Again, I took the liberty for tonight's to cross these out. With the half-day kindergarten, the kindergarten assistants, there was support to not, or building consensus to say those are untouchable for our school committee. Eliminate department heads at Shepherd Hill Regional High School, could potentially yield $250,000. And then we get into eliminate Shepherd Hill music stipends, and then eliminate interscholastic athletics. Again, we did hear some vocalization. These aren't all confirmed yet, but this is what I'm trying to give you feedback on what people are talking about at this point in time as landing on a list of non-negotiables. But this is, we need direction from our school committee and guidance as to where they want us to try to provide additional reductions, because we have to come in with a balanced budget, and we have to come in with 2 budgets. One with the override and assessments, and one without. And then we get into some more detail about the override. This, as you recall, this was presented on February 1st. There have been, I don't even want to tell you how many meetings we've had to try to work on what an override for the community of Dudley would look like moving forward, which we know there's a huge impact on Charlton, so it's not that we've been avoiding Charlton in any way. We've just been trying to prepare the community of Dudley for an override. So I don't know if I want to turn over, I do want to turn over to you.
Okay, sure. So, part of the discussion after the February 1st meeting was trying to find exactly what structure would be appropriate for Dudley in the override. So, these pages kind of lay out the different levels of thinking and all of that. I think after today's meeting, there are 2 paths that seem to make the most sense for us to approach the taxpayers in Dudley with ultimately. But as you guys are very well aware, this ultimately is a Board of Selectmen decision. We certainly would appreciate if school committee has some considered weight in the discussion. But this is going to be something that the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee in Dudley have to stand behind, have to get behind, and have to make final decisions on. And those meetings will occur. February 27th is a FinCom meeting in Dudley, And March 20th is the Board of Selectmen meeting where it's anticipated they will take a vote for specific ballot language.
And, sorry, if I may, and we're looking to hold a community forum in the Shepherd Hill Auditorium regarding the override and financing for the district on March 22nd.
Yes. One of the considerations in Dudley that should be addressed, that needs to be addressed in Charlton as well, is the funding for the MSBA feasibility study. Our budget increase, even though rather sizable, especially for the communities of Dudley, Charlton, does not include that. So that $1 million is something that will need to be raised and appropriated outside of our budget request. So, you know, again, the rough number for Charlton, I think, was 536 off the top of my head. And again, I'm sure Mr. Bolus and FinCom will come up with a creative way to fund that with minimal impact on the taxpayers. But, you know, in Dudley, that's a component of, you know, one of the potential override plans as we move forward, as well as potentially paying off some of the capital debt that was approved in September of 2022. And I know the town has talked about, you know, looking at some of its available funding to do the same, you know, on the Charlton side. So I think those are all positive steps.
If you could, just explain what the feasibility study would do and why we're doing it for those that may not understand the whole.
Actually, I'm going to.
Okay.
Or Steve.
So Shepherd Hill, after 13 tries, was invited into the Mass School Building Authority for consideration for feasibility study. The feasibility study would be to look at Shepherd Hill and determine what, anywhere from the assessment of the building, to look at the, you know, what the building would look like, and move it all the way to a schematic design. So that's why the cost is, total cost is $1 million, which is on the lower end that we approved at the school building committee meeting the other night, to be conservative, but we believe that will work. And so it looks at all of those factors, but it also meets with the community and works with the community to figure out what the community wants to see with Shepherd Hill Regional High School. Because at the end of the day, you have to look at anything from a renovation to a new construction. It's a requirement of MSBA. I don't know why I'm missing that tonight. Mass School Building Authority, it's a requirement of them to look at all of those, and then you get to a point to push it towards schematic design and then design. There is no guarantee that you are going to be in feasibility because it requires a local authorization for that. So we are now in the phase of preparing for that. We had to provide a lot of documents, a lot of information to Mass School Building Authority, and then with local authorization for feasibility, then we could possibly move into the feasibility study. It's not a guarantee, but that's the next step. MSBA doesn't guarantee anything. And with the feasibility, it is again a lagging reimbursement, but you get reimbursed for the feasibility study, so that would come back to the communities on the assessment in future years after it's appropriated or locally authorized by the two communities.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very extensive study of Shepherd Hill Regional High School with a lot of community input.
And it's taken you a while to climb up the list.
Yes.
In order to get approved for this.
Yes. Yep. And I know the school building committee asked for a sample of that. I provided 3 documents that totals 1,400 pages for a feasibility study, something like that. It's in two volumes plus an addendum, and it's roughly 1,400 pages of feasibility study. And that was for a intermediate school. Just to provide an example, so the school building committee could see what that looks like.
So again, for Charlton, the way the 3.665 million splits out is an increase to assessment by $1.9 million. When we have the first pass of the state numbers at the beginning of March, we'll be able to delineate that very specifically. We'll know what our Chapter 70 potential increase is. Again, you know, it's not a final budget that we're going to receive at the beginning of March. It's initial projections, and you guys are all well aware of the budget process at the state level. The governor's budget will come out, the House budget will come out, the Senate budget will come out, In the past, they've scaffolded upon each other. The governor's was kind of the low point. The House was a step forward, and you could usually count on that being at least covered by the Senate with, maybe a change here or a change there. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a little more volatility than I think from the past 20 years. But again, we have to act on the information that we have. There's no guarantee that we'll have a final budget prior to town meeting. So we have to go with the information, the best level of information that we have. We'll run the numbers with the governor's budget initially, and as the House budget is developed, we'll look at those numbers and include them as well. But again, that $1.9 million does not include the money for the feasibility study. As a note that probably is self-explanatory, if Dudley were to successfully pass the multi-year version of an override, Charlton's future assessments would increase as well, The 6.8% increase for Dudley Charlton, again, is a large number, again, especially in these communities. But back at the end of December, beginning part of January, I put the question out to listserv for my peers in other school districts and asked what they were looking at. And there were about 60 responses that came back, and the average of those were 6%. So yes, Dudley Charlton is a little bit higher. Those 60 included everybody from regional schools to school departments of towns. So everybody's budget is different. Some school budgets don't include utilities, so they don't have that level of increase. Some school budgets don't include health insurance. Usually they don't if it's a town department, just as Ashley had indicated prior. That's usually budgeted someplace else. So regional schools are unique in the fact that they cover all of those expenses, as Superintendent LaMarche indicated before. But again, our level of increase is not, while extraordinary for Dudley Charlton, is not out of line for across the state. And it was, what, 40 or so?
Oh, yep. I want to share, as we work with a lot of our peers, last week there was a quick survey put out by superintendents because of the increased need for operational overrides within our state. Within 3 days, 70 districts replied to the survey with the override. 30 districts out of 70 indicated that they do not have a need for an override. 4 anticipated a need for an override in FY25. 4 reported having a successful override last year. 12 districts indicated overrides are non-starter in their city or town, so they have to develop a level funded budget. And 20 districts indicated the request for an override is on the table for FY24. So it's not, we're trying to share that it's just not a Charlton issue, it's not a Dudley issue, it's a Commonwealth issue.
And the last 2 pages are simply our revenue and projected assessments. These numbers are projected based on the Abrams Group analysis of Chapter 70, and they were put together at the beginning part of January. I know the revised numbers that are still unofficial, but again, revised from the Abrams Group, did indicate that the minimum required for Charlton would be higher than listed here. But we're not going to know that until, again, the beginning part of March. And as soon as we know that, within a day or two, the information will come over to the town.
Didn't the Abrams Group also give you some projections for 25 and 26 and 27 of 700,000?
Between 7, yeah.
Well, those are the budgetary type increases that we'd be looking at on the Dudley side, from the override.
Okay.
Okay.
So they're going to factor that in when they're figuring out how much they're going to recoup, yes?
Yeah, again, going back to your question before, Mr. Kamasi, about, how we get our revenues and what share is the state versus the local communities. Again, I try to be simplistic for ease of sakes, because it doesn't matter if it's 50-50 or 49-51. But when Dudley has a cap of a 2.5% assessment increase for us, that means that local assessments can only go up by 2.5%. If that's half of our revenue budget, that means our overall budget can go up by 1.5%. That has been challenging and over good years. It's been extremely difficult in bad years, but with the increased level of student need that we're facing, with the increased costs that we're facing, it's impossible to live with going forward. And that is simply the facts and why, you know, trying to deal with a level funded budget for fiscal '24 is, it can present more challenges than anybody really wants.
A great example of the challenges is we've reduced our bus fleet by 7 buses since 2019. 7 buses, but the cost is much higher. It didn't yield a cost savings. Maybe at the time, maybe there was an initial cost savings, but overall, and for the life of a contract, there's no cost savings in there. And when we went out to bid the first time, we actually had one company bid $1 million increase for us, for our yellow bus transportation. $1 million.
But that's not the one you chose.
Of course not, but it's the cost of doing business out there.
I know, I can't.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Any questions from the committee?
Bill had a
Oh, I know, I was
question.
gonna get to us first and then go to Bill. Bill's always got a question.
I have a question.
I can read it if you guys can.
I'm gonna go to Kristen
He's
first.
gonna go to me first. In the beginning, when there was the, I think it said $300,000 for technology.
Yes.
Does that include going to one-to-one, or?
No.
What, is it just teacher?
It's replacement. It's rolling, again, we
Okay.
had a pretty healthy cycle from 2017 with a lease to purchase and all that, and our additions throughout that process. I don't want to make the community think that we're not adding, as we do, but when we start looking at desktops versus Chromebooks and all that kind of stuff, we're really at the point of desktops needing a new cycle, a refresh cycle on that. And so, because we finished the lease program, we're looking to enter into a lease program for that refresher.
Okay.
Because devices are, you know, we're stretching our devices 5, 6, 7 years now.
Okay.
And that's a long cycle for a daily desktop computer.
All right.
So it doesn't bring us even close to a one-to-one environment, not even close.
As long as technology can receive the appropriate updates, we keep it in service if it's still usable.
Right.
But when they stop being able to receive updates, they become potential threats for virus in the network, so we take them out of production, obviously.
Makes sense. Okay.
Any questions from this committee here? I can't.
So he
Just like
said,
where's
if
the
Dudley
law?
approves their override, this ask will almost certainly require cuts to Charlton's municipal budget. Are there other options on the table if Charlton voters won't approve the full ask?
I think that's directed towards us.
Yes, I think it is. Because you don't think I'm gonna venture that answer.
You know, we've said all along, we've been working on this for easily a year, if not over a year. Getting into last fiscal year '23, we saw the writing on the wall for this. As you know, we presented 3 different budgets last year. We understood the fiscal structures were stressed in Dudley. We do appreciate the support of Charlton, but we know we can't come in and ask for, you know, more than our share in Charlton. But we're at a point now where we're you know, our discovery, and I know that there's some confusion on this. When we were first entering this, we were looking at maybe a $2 million override or something of that nature for the schools, but our bills just kept compounding themselves. Yes, did we know some of them up front? Yes, but could we try to do some cost savings or cost avoidance? Yes, we tried to do all of that. But the bills, every time Rich would come in with a new return on, this is what the specialized transportation contract is going to be. You know, typically a $40,000, $60,000 increase for a year, it's $150,000. And that's I mean, Rich has worked endless with the vendors to say, wait, what can we do? What can we, you know? So we understand, and part of our discussion too is the understanding that Charlton you have a fiscal plan moving forward as a community. You do. You've allowed investment in your community, you've allowed new growth in your community, you have a fiscal plan for that. We've said early on that this ask is going to impact that and change that dramatically, and that's not our goal. It's not our goal at all. So I don't have a direct answer on that. We're still working on our numbers, but the question I would have in return is how do we ask for a multi-million-dollar override and cut 15 people out of our district or 20 people out of our district?
Understood, and that's from that town, right? I know that some of the discussion on this side, right, and I hate to make it a us and them, okay, but is, you know, your 1.9 is just about all the new growth money that we've got coming in, which means if it all goes to the school, nothing else in town gets funded. The positions we're looking at, okay? I know that the fire and the police are looking to up the dispatcher, for instance, as an example, okay? Something's, just like you're faced with that other chart, or something's gotta get cut to get down, well, we're gonna be faced with those same exact questions. And that's what the discussion, I think, is gonna be on our side.
Yeah,
You know? If we can raise, if we're gonna get 1.9 million this year, how do we give it all to the school? And unfortunately, I don't wanna make that sound,
Are we in Q&A now?
I completely understand, and that's why a couple of times you heard me say the timing of something is not right. The timing of our transportation contract. We would have loved to have one more year in our transportation contract without having to go back out to bid. We would have loved to not end our cycle in technology for looking for new purchases before we head off the Windows 10 kerfuffle that we're going to all end up in if our machines don't support Windows 11. We would have loved to have to not touch upon it. We would have loved if OSD never said 14% increase, but yet the legislators capped districts and school aid at 4.7%. We all know that inflation is well over 4.7%. Timing is everything. We understand that, and we're going to continue to work with you. Our goal is not to be in a position where it looks like we're taking everything you have. That's not the position we want to be in.
I get that, and I understand, Superintendent, timing is everything.
Yep.
Right? And being in the masonry industry, I've been in between a rock and a hard place before. Okay? And that's where we're at. We're in a true rock and a hard place. We're going to have to come up with some answers.
Yep.
And yes, we are into questions and answers if you have a question.
I do. I guess everybody can hear me from here?
Yep.
So, there's, without a question, both towns want the best education we can afford for children. That's not debatable. It's what we can afford is the other part of that. The whole sped, I understand, I was at your last meeting, I understand the sped funding increased from 3% to 14%. That's totally on the table. What I don't understand is why it seems like you're basing your budget on what Dudley may or may not approve for an override without really consulting us up front. And it's not a personal ego thing. We're not even sure we're not going for an override yet.
To respectfully, we don't control what you choose to do as far as an override. Dudley has said that last year said, we're going for an override, let's work together on it. Again, we've been talking about this for a while now.
Yeah.
So,
You guys have been,
no, we've met with your town administrator and communicated that with him as well. So, we don't control what you as a community are going to end up doing, and just like the roofs. We didn't control, we don't control how you're going to fund that. We are going to incur the debt and put it back towards you as a community, but how you fund that is going to be your choice. Our budget is based off of the increased bills that we have coming in, to try to provide a level service budget, just a level service. The only thing that would be considered new is supporting the students with disabilities, supporting students with special education, supporting students who are struggling learners, supporting students who are struggling with coming out of interrupted learning. That's a huge impact to our budget, without question.
Of course, and the state's not even helping you on that aspect? Or?
That's why I was talking yesterday at luncheon with the legislators, and that was one of the biggest topics, is you've got the 14% increase alone, you've got to come up with some way to fund that for us. You have to help us, because the community of Shrewsbury, which, I'm not trying to compare Charlton to Shrewsbury, but it's $1 million hit for them. Just that 14% increase is $1 million hit for Shrewsbury, which obviously has a huge budget, but it's just, but the actual value, the 14% increase was valued out yesterday for our state at $92 million impact on public schools.
And when you're bound by Prop 2.5, 14% increase is big.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't give an exclusion
I wish.
for that? Oh, that's right. They forgot about that piece of it.
So our budget is really built off of what these, to us, huge increases to. We thought we'd be more creative with Dudley and not have such an impact on Charlton moving into this, but every time we turned a corner, we'd get hit with, again, the bus contract alone was a $500,000 nugget that we didn't, and we worked it down to $400,000 to try to make it palatable for moving forward. We wish we didn't have to go.
That's with a lot of state funding as well, because it's a regional system, so you.
But it's a lagging reimbursement, we have to pay for it up front.
Oh.
They pay a year later.
All right,
yeah.
but that's lagging, all all right, all right.
So is the special ed, right?
But if you're, for a $1.9 million ask from Charlton, keep us involved a little earlier on, and not just count on the fact that, oh, Dudley's gonna do an override in Charlton while they've got revenue coming in, and they'll be able to match it, because that's not, it's.
I apologize if that's the message that you received, because that's never been the message we've had.
We shared information about the budget and the trajectory of the budget as soon as we knew it.
But when we met in November, at our all boards meeting, you were asked, what we thought your budget was gonna be for next year, and it was 3% district-wide. This is in November of 2022. 3% district-wide, which would have been 7%.
I don't remember presenting that in the all boards meeting. Actually, I sat in the back row and
Well,
school committee sat at the
the
table.
number in my head was 1.1 to 1.2, not 1.9. But that was a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I don't recall.
That was 3 months ago.
I don't recall being that detailed at that all boards meeting, because this, I've attended two, and this one, school committee sat at the table, we didn't sit at the table.
Any further questions on the screen there? I see that
He
Bill.
just said he was leaving.
He was
He'll see
leaving,
you
so
next-
he's done.
your
And
next
he's the
meeting.
only one I think that would.
And another one just said, there's an issue, the fiscal plan in our town is predominantly for capital improvements, but this completely upends that, something has to give, as Hank said.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so he's done. We don't have to worry about him. How about up here? Those of us that are actually here.
When
Any
you
other-
said you were
any
talking to the
questions of
state
this?
legislatures, is there any, I guess, interest on the state level of saying mental health is through the roof and we need to help our schools and work
The
together,
new
get some
governor,
funding?
thank you for the question. The new governor has done a lot of talk around that, but the impact, and when you get into mental health, and we did receive a small grant, but you get tied into DPH, you get tied into other agencies, so it's no longer a DESE, complete DESE process. So having the agencies work together, I think, is the complexity of that, to try to provide additional support for
Like you
schools.
say, in a day, you can have to come up with $225,000 for one student
Yeah,
out of district.
yes.
And that was today, just.
You know, I mean, that's pretty hard to not have any help.
Mhm.
It just doesn't seem feasible.
There will be help for that, but again, it's lagging.
Yeah.
We have to pay for it up front, and then we have to submit for reimbursement for it, and again, that could be a sliding scale on what the reimbursement is, and it's not on the full, it's never on the full value to start. And so whatever percentage is reimbursed, which, let's say it's 80%, the sliding scale is you may only get 75% of the 80%. So it's a formula that you have to work through, but it's a lagging reimbursement, and it does have some intricacies that could change in it as well. But, so, that's why we're responsible for the full 225 right up front, because then the state works on their formula after that.
Is it getting worse or is it getting better? Because I'm looking at when you're saying the kindergarten and the preschool and all that, and you need so much extra help because of the issues coming in. Wow.
Yeah, I don't want to say worse. Hopefully we're at the high water mark of return from interrupted learning. And as students, progress through now that they're back in school, as they progress through our system and our care and of our teachers and our educators and our professionals, that we'll see a return on that time and investment of our professional staff.
So you cut 15 staff, and in 5 years, these kids are now needing that kind of, you know what I mean? It's not gonna work without state help.
Right,
No
so,
way.
so I want to clarify, the kids coming in now, especially at the younger years, it's because the services that were typically in place for those students, that when they were birthed to 3 years old, which is another agency is responsible for that, they are lagging in every way. They are not in place. We are getting multiple referrals with lack of support services for many of those families. And in-home, they used to provide in-home services. Those things just aren't happening right now.
Yeah.
And so they are coming in with us right now with significant needs, and hopefully there'll be a buildup of those 0 to 3 programs, because otherwise the public schools do own responsibility for those students and those student needs as they come in.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else? So that we don't leave, because this was not that great a news, what you
No.
presented, but I'd like to leave it on a high note. So why don't you give us a 2-minute recap of that music presentation you did at the school a couple of weeks ago that big festival, all right? So that we can hear something great that came out of
Oh,
Shepherd Hill.
Well, Shepherd Hill, I'm still blown away with all of that they do in their, I call it more of like a theater arts program or something like that, but the fantasies, the groups, the students' participation, and, you know, even like marching band, you know, that campus comes alive, and those students in those performance areas of our school work harder than anybody else. I mean, I can go in on a Saturday at 7 in the morning and leave at 7 at night, and maybe they're not the same students, but the staff and students are still working on things. You know, their practices could be 3 hours, but their performances they'll blow you away. I bring my 13-year-old daughter who likes theater and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, she's in awe every time, you know, when she comes into Shepherd Hill and sees either a production or the winter I call Winter Carnival, the winter
Holiday show?
With the Holiday Spectacular, which is phenomenal as well, year over year, but then this competition that he did. And what I shared is, I learned for the first time, I didn't know this, is that if you host, there were 26 districts, I think there?
24.
Huh?
24.
24 districts. When you host, you can't place.
24 groups.
24 groups. I think it was,
They could have middle school kids and high school kids. In high school, they sometimes have 2 separate groups, but there were 24 performances.
but the home school can't place within that, like a first place, second place, whatever, but they still get to perform, and just the camaraderie and the students and the audience and the, you know, and the volunteers that serve lunch and food, and it's an amazing, it's really a shining star for our community and for Shepherd Hill.
Congratulations on a successful
Yeah.
program.
Thank you.
And your basketball team's kicking butt too.
Girls and boys. Girls and boys. Boys is
Yeah.
17-1, and girls are 16-2, 16-3 maybe. So we look for them to go deep. I know that the boys are prepared for the Clark tournament, and I think that they're prepared for a great experience this year, starting this weekend. So, yeah, it's been fun to go to the games and watch, and just, yeah.
Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
I should plug that in the last Sunday in March, the Winter Percussion is hosting the same kind of event as the Showfire.
Yeah. In late March.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right.
Lots going on.
Good to see
Thank you for your time again. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Rich.
All right, there's a lot of information in that packet. Try and digest. Yep. Okay. Now we'll go back to our agenda. So the first thing I will do is we will go over, we'll accept the minutes of the last meeting. You all got them in your packet. I hope you've had time to, huh? Oh, that's this one?
Yep.
Oh, I'm
Just
sorry,
to
my
sign.
packet, I printed. All right, so if you've all had a chance to read the minutes, is there any discussion? Being none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed say no. Vote.
I'll abstain, I wasn't
Oh,
there.
okay,
Oh,
well then, you know what,
apologize.
just write
Want me to put
A.
abstain?
Yeah,
Sure,
just,
sure.
or just write, yeah. You're
Okay, I
abstaining
can do
there.
that, absent, yeah.
Okay, next up I had a review of the annual report. So I put that in the packet, or I put it in the Dropbox. So the annual report is the description of what we do that goes in the annual town report, which is published in May. In time for the town meeting?
I think so, something like that,
in time
yeah.
for the town meeting. So it talks about what we do through the course of, okay, and I wanted to give everybody a chance to take a look at it and approve it. The only question I had was on this little chart at the bottom. Okay?
Yep.
It says $70,000 fire overtime expense, and then the explanation is, correct the health hazard from rodents in the chip-in area.
Oh,
and
did I
install a
not?
drop
I
ceiling.
might have not taken that out of there, that
So-
should be there.
So let's change that. Okay?
That's exactly what they did with that.
And Has
I will
everybody
fix
had a
that
chance to
part.
see it? I'll pass my copy around if you want to take a look.
Yeah, if there's anything you want to add, I can add to it too, and then I'll
Yeah,
send
I
it to
did-
Mary
I
when
honestly
you're.
didn't see anything.
Okay, I will fix that part then.
I didn't see anything that,
Okay.
it's just a good overview. It's a listing of how we function, what our goals are, and some other high points that we
Yeah.
did over the past year. All right, so you'll correct that?
Yep, I'll correct it, and then I'll give it to Mary so she can put it in the book.
And then the next thing I put on the agenda was, and I also put them in the, Ashley sent out the auditor's management letter, the financial statements audit, and the government reports, which is all the government money we get from either state or government is in a separate
It's all
audit report.
it's just federal
Just-
money.
Oh, just federal, okay.
Yep, any federal, so the federal government states if we receive $750,000 or more in federal funding, we have to be audited. So we've never hit that threshold until we got our CARES money in, and the FEMA money in. So that started, so I think last year was our first single audit. So they audit all of our federal grants to make sure that we comply with federal legislation, and then we were audited again this year.
So I would recommend you read it, all right? I wanted to bring it
Yeah,
up.
can you guys all see it? Because remember we had that issue last week with the,
No, you,
our Dropbox hit capacity.
but see, the Dropbox isn't in the town.
I think because with there's free storage with the Dropbox, and I think we hit that free storage
Okay.
maximum. So that's why you couldn't see the agenda and the budget that I sent in.
Right, but when I went to put it in, they
You
just went in.
you can see it, but no, because I can see it, but no one else can see it. But you can see it on your end because it's in there.
Okay.
It's weird. I don't understand. I don't know.
Did-
But
all right.
I got a notification that we hit like the free storage capacity in there. So I don't know if you want me to go in or if you want to go in and delete old stuff out of
Yeah,
there.
let me take a look at that, Ashley.
Okay, or I can move it to like the town so it's not deleted. I can move it to like our town drive.
I think
We can
everyone
see it.
here can get into the Dropbox, right? You've all got the invitations? All right, I'll help you with, if you
I
haven't.
can see it,
All right,
yep,
'cause you've seen
yep,
it, okay.
yep, I can-
Well, so in there is these management letters, the auditor's report.
Mm-hmm.
And I would highly recommend, okay, that you take a look at the management letter. That to me is the high point, okay?
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of where the auditor and I work together. We kind of
Right.
put down the things that we noticed throughout the year that he noticed in the audit that aren't necessarily bad, but things that we should look at or just things that we should keep in mind.
Right, and I've got a few points I'll bring up. But
Yep.
I do want to say, in the financial audit, right, the next to the last page is probably the most concise one page,
Mm-hmm.
where the money comes in and where it goes out. On one page, all right, it's page 53 of the auditor's report, right? And I'll show you that, all right? But we should be in the habit, when the auditors let it come out, to read it, and then to bring it up and talk about it here, if you see something. So, I did that, and I have a couple of things that I wanted to ask about.
Do you want me to go through the points that he made, or do you want to ask your questions instead?
No, I'll just ask my questions, and
go
if you've
for
got
it.
to get back at some other time, actually, that's fine. One of the things I did learn, I always thought we had one unfunded liability. We actually have two, huh? We have a pension unfunded liability and an OPEB unfunded liability. For some reason, I was always under the impression it was one big fund that we had this liability with, and that's not. It's 19 million on our pension. That's a bigger number than I realized.
So that 19 million technically sits with Worcester Regional.
Right, with
Right,
Worcester
but
Regional.
yes.
Right, which means that, if that ever goes out, we had to come up with 19
Right,
million, okay?
right.
Which it probably won't. But the OPEB is ours.
Correct.
Just the town.
Yes.
That's $6 million, okay, that we owe. And they made the note in here that we're very low on our percentage of the funding. And that, in light, what does it say? We have to fully fund that liability by 2035? And that
Yes.
the town should begin to factor in increases as discussed above, all right? And we're hearing about departments like the schools, right, our IT, right? A lot of things are gonna start to increase. And maybe it's time we start having some discussions 5 years down the road. What are some of these other expenses like this that are gonna start hitting us Because otherwise, we come to a meeting like this, and then boom, they hit us with, we need this, we need this. And we already knew we needed that back then. Let's just make ourselves aware, okay, of what we're gonna need. So that's the kind of thing that you get in these management letters, is when you read these. These are the people that go through it and say, yeah, hey, you're good. They were very happy with what we're doing with the OPEB liability, okay? That we're better than almost every other town. We're funded at what, 22%? Most towns are under 10%. So-
Right.
But that was something that we started.
Yep.
With Donna, and she was very adamant in the beginning. We put the money in, we put the money in, we put the money in. And they said, we encourage the town to continue this funding strategy, right? I leave that, I say that because I know what your thoughts are on OPEB if we run out of money. But anyway, I bring that up.
That's usually the first place we cut.
Another comment that they made is that we don't really make a whole heck of a lot of money on our cash,
Right,
okay?
yeah.
Why? What do you think is the
Well, I know
current-
last year's, we have a new treasurer, so she's not comfortable with investing. So her and I have been working together because the rates are so high right now, to try to go out and make money. So I know we invested a little bit. We did like a 1 month, like treasury bond, and it made us a little bit of money. So her and I have been working together to try to go and invest more money and kind of
But just
play around
to
with
put it
it.
into perspective, okay?
Can I add a thought on that?
Yes.
So along those lines, earlier tonight, I thought I heard Kurt say that I could, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought he said something along the lines of, we staggered the permitting for these new projects so that the money would be spread out over years.
Yep.
And I thought to myself immediately, like, the time value of money has just been lost. You wanna take the lump sum and invest it.
So we
so
did
that it's in
that.
our account, not theirs.
Right, so we did
Right?
that because, to kind of give ourselves a little bit of a cushion for free cash every year.
Right.
So we did it, and it allowed Amazon to start going forward faster.
But we lose the opportunity for
To-
the revenue.
right.
From the interest.
So at the
But
time
not-
when we
not if
originally
we're
did
not
it,
investing it properly.
well, right, so
Well,
at
right,
the,
but I would assume that we would.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah, yeah.
at the time, the interest rates were really low.
Yeah.
When we originally had said we should split it, so we figured, well, might as well split it because it gives us the cushion for capital.
So in the future, maybe we wanna be like
Upfront.
collecting as fast as we
Yeah.
can. Cause usually on the back end of any business, you wanna collect as fast as you can.
Right.
True.
So
And
was it-
invest.
Yeah.
The difference in that was probably 3 months.
Yeah, it was
because
like right at the end of the
really-
fiscal year.
It was pretty much April to July.
Right, and then now he's had other ones that have since come, but,
Okay.
yeah, it was like it was right at we are teetering over the fiscal year, so he's like, I could get you guys a little bit more money now, or I can wait till FY '23.
Right.
So we kinda said, well, if we can have more money now and a little bit less next year, that's how he could split the permit, otherwise it would have all just came in this fiscal year.
Right. And a couple of $100,000 could make some money, but what they wrote in their letter, okay, was in fiscal '23, we had $16 million in cash and equivalents, and it gave us less than $10,000 in investment income.
Right.
God.
Ooh,
Okay,
yeah,
that's
bad.
where they picked out, you know,
Okay.
you gotta do better on that. And, you know, whether she's new at it or,
They're saying, hey, sometimes you can get $40,000 on $1 million.
Right.
Okay, so that should have generated maybe closer to $500,000 for 100,000 times.
Yeah, I know right at the end of last fiscal year, we lost a bunch of money.
Would that then pay
Because the
for
interest rates
itself
dropped.
if we hired a financial advisor, somebody that came in and
So
or
we,
is our money so widespread?
right,
over
we
time?
have one kind of that we work with our, like, they house all of our trust funds. So, we work with Bartholomew, and he comes in every year and kind of presents to us and tells us like how the interest rates are doing and kind of where we could be. So that's who we actually went and invested a little bit with, this past time. So we just kind of told him how much, and he went out, said, okay, I can get you a treasury bond at this rate. How long do you want to do it for? So we went out, I think, for like a month or two. And we did that, and I don't remember how much it made us, I'd have to ask her. But we did that as like a test, and then I said, well, if you have this money sitting, because we have so many different bank accounts, if we have this money just sitting and you're not needing it, and then we usually have to time it with the school payments, because when the school payments come in, it's like $1 million, we're sending $2 million, sending out the door, so trying to time it, and then we time it with like our real estate payments coming in, so her and I have been working together to try to get that up since the rates are up so high, because we make nothing, just, it makes little just sitting in like the bank. It's when you have, but you're going out to a volatile market at that point, because you're dealing with the rates that are going like this. So it's a hit-miss situation. Like, we lost a lot of money at the end of last year. I
Because of
shouldn't say
investments,
lost.
actually?
Yeah, because so our trust funds are invested,
Okay.
kind of like a stock market.
Yep.
And then same with the OPEB money. So our OPEB here, and then water and sewers OPEB, our stabilizations, and then any of the trust funds we have are all invested. That's by,
Yeah, they're-
like, Mass General Law.
They're
We have to
invested by
do
the
that.
treasurer.
Invested by what?
The treasurer, because she is the only trustee
Correct,
of the
yes.
OPED, okay?
Yep.
The woman you just said is new and uncomfortable making it.
Yeah. So those are, Bartholomew handles all of that for us, and they do it by, Mass General Law sets what we're allowed to invest in, so they go by that. And then they invest in whatever we're allowed to by Mass General Law. And they usually go, it's less volatile than what, like what your 401K would be sitting in if you're
Right.
dealing with the stock market, so it's a little bit,
If you're like me and you're over 65, you're very, very conservative.
Right.
But if I was 35, I'm
right.
very aggressive.
So it's like something in the middle of that, and then we're only allowed to invest in certain things, and like the ones that usually generate you a lot of money, we're not usually allowed to invest in. So there's just certain, but they deal with all of that. So that's not anything that we do.
That I wanted to bring up was, we gotta do a better job at investing.
Yeah.
That should be one of our
Yeah. Yeah, so we've been working with him to try to, because you can get higher interest rates than dealing with the bank.
And then, and of course, I'm not saying anything you don't already know, because you've read the letter, okay? They haven't. They do recommend that we come up with a better policy and procedures manual.
Yes.
We don't have a very good uniform financial policies.
Yeah, we
procedure
technically
manual
only
across
have the.
all departments.
Right, we technically only have the one that sits under the selectman's authority. So Donna had left one that she was working on before she retired, which I had been working on. But when I met with the government study committee, I had said I don't really have authority because there's technically no finance director bylaw. So I don't really have any teeth in any of my policies because they all mention the finance director. So it would be easier for me to have teeth in my policies to make a financial policy booklet that sits under my purview if I had a bylaw. So that was something I had recommended to them. So if that came, then I could institute my financial policies and I would have teeth because then they all sit under my, instead of sitting under, I have less authority as a town accountant as I do as the finance director because I have authority over all the finances. Does that make sense? So I'm working on
I still don't
them.
understand why you can't just put out a book that says, this is how you'll deposit your money, this is how you.
So we do have some, just not as many as we probably should.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have like a turnover policy, which is like all the revenues, and then I have like our AP policy. Like just like, but that sits all in the Board of Selectmen's policies, it's in there under financial policies. So there's a couple in there, that's like a travel policy.
We're working on pulling those out as a separate booklet
Yeah.
and bolstering those right now to find out where the gaps are.
Yeah, because then when we go out to bid for bonds, that's the first thing they ask. They ask for our financial policy booklet,
Yeah,
so.
okay. Again, I bring these things up because these are the things that you will read in a management letter. They're just very good background. We should all know what they're recommending and what they're saying that we should be doing. It's in the Dropbox if you want to, now, it's 58 pages, okay?
Yeah, the management letter I think is like 7 or 8.
Yeah, the
It's
management
separate.
letter is 5
Yeah.
pages, but the actual audit.
It's
okay,
pretty long.
Is 58 pages, so if you got nothing to do one Sunday afternoon because football's all over, there you go.
And then just to make note, there's the ambulance receipt one, I think I worked with the auditor. We had that big deposit that came in at the end of the year for our Medicare reimbursement, which held us harmless. So that big deposit, there was just a timing in the Comstar report that we get to our report. So that's that difference for that one. And then there was a big bank reconciliation that he had on there between what the bank had and what we had, and I just fixed them today, so.
Yeah, okay.
Took care of
And you'll
those.
deal with the assessor that, or Andrew, you might, where she's overestimated or something.
So, I've talked to her about that, and I talked to the auditor before he published it, and he doesn't agree, but she wants a cushion in there, because if Amazon ever comes back, or like LNG comes back, those are big ticket items, and they can ask for an abatement. And then where does that money come from if we take it all out? So she kind of left a cushion in there for now, just in case, because they could ask until, was it February 1st, I think was the deadline. So she wanted that in there just in case they came back and tried to argue about their value. Same with
Wow.
MCI, because that
That's-
was the big windfall, or like Millennium or something, just like a big ticket,
That's an
so.
extraordinary event.
Correct,
okay,
so we figured once that's done, we'll definitely look at it to decrease it, but we left a cushion, she wanted to leave the cushion in there, because if they came back, we'd have to make up that money somewhere, so at least if it's sitting there.
Mhm.
So she said, once we're kind of through that, she'll sit down with the board, and they have to declare it as surplus before we can do anything with it.
Okay.
And of course, this is the report that determines where our free cash comes from.
It certifies how much we get in free cash, and so that's all part and parcel of what we should be up to speed with.
All right, next on my agenda, I had an update from the finance director, followed by an update from the town manager, so.
Anything else we haven't already covered tonight? Now's the time
Just
to.
waiting for the state budget to come in so we can
Yeah, that's the thing,
do
right?
something.
I think right now, we're kind of sitting on our hands until we
Yeah.
see what those numbers look like. I mean, we've had a lot of assumptions, but, you know, like right now, we don't even have a Bay Path budget to
Right.
compare it to, because it's all, their budget is all based off the minimum, state aid. And, you know, 3 or 4 additional students that are accepted into Bay Path can provide a pretty significant swing as to the amount that their assessment goes up. Where, you know, Dudley Charlton is essentially kind of locked in. So,
So.
I say locked in, but, you
Yeah.
know, there's more negotiation involved.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So we've had some discussions in the background what we'll do, but we can't really do anything until I see what the state numbers come in at, because I have no revenue at that point, so.
Mhm. Have you gotten every department's budget in?
Oh, yeah.
So
Mhm.
you're that far along?
So that, I put our old Excel spreadsheet in there, so that budget ties to what's in ClearGov, if you rather look at that to see how the percentage difference is. That's in the Dropbox, if you can see it. So that's everyone's budget, that's in, Bay Path gave us like an estimate budget, so that's also included in there, and then, obviously Dudley Charlton's is in there, so. And then the health insurance, we're having a 6% increase to health insurance, so that new number's in there, along with everyone's COLAs are in there. So that is like our, like, I'd say a pretty solid budget for what we have for now.
yeah, once, and say it's absolutely nothing final, because it's really not even a proposed budget until
Right.
there's a 0 at the bottom, so.
Yeah.
We're just kind of waiting to pull out the sharpened pencils until we actually see what those state numbers are.
Well, that's another thing on this recap sheet that's at the back of the auditor's report. Look at the percentage that we spend on schools versus our total budget. The schools is 50%.
Mm-hmm.
16 million out of a $32 million budget goes to the schools. So we are so dependent on what their budget comes back as.
Right.
Okay, and how it affects ours.
And then
That's a big percentage.
at some point, we'll have to talk about how we're gonna fund that 500,000, if I need to put it into the budget, or if we're gonna try doing a capital
Yeah.
exclusion for it.
Yeah, and right now, I would say my suggestion would be to go for a capital exclusion.
Right.
Or require a town vote, it'd be a one-time hit to the assessment, but it wouldn't come, you know, essentially, we wouldn't be pulling that from, you know, our stabilization funds, and it'd be reimbursed through the MSBA program through the process. So
Mhm.
at least it's then more of a publicly involved process that they will have to get a town vote to get it passed,
Right.
but it'd be a limited impact, and essentially, a final project that goes forward will require a debt exclusion vote anyway, so be, I think, an advisable first step.
Do you think that they will get that ready for the May town meeting test for the?
They would have to, because they need to secure the funding mechanism for the feasibility study prior to June 30th.
Okay, so it would have to be voted up or down.
Right.
Both towns.
Mhm.
By-
Right.
Well, of course, they're gonna.
I think they're funding it through their override.
Because their 500 comes out of the override.
Mhm.
Right.
Ours would be a separate
Yep.
motion at the town meeting. And yeah, without that money, they can't move forward.
Correct.
Without a feasibility study.
And right now, we wouldn't, I mean, we do have excess remaining in free cash, but it's not $500,000, so.
And we still have to think about, I mean, I know it's been a quiet winter, but we still have to think about snow and ice
Right.
at some point. If he, I mean, I don't think he hasn't gone over yet, but
The letters are written.
Yeah, I'm sure he has it in his back
Yeah.
pocket.
Yeah.
So, at some point, we have to get snow. I mean, it's kind of inevitable,
Yeah.
so.
No, you're right. But just to stay on the school for a second, so that we follow that progression of what we will be faced with in a few years. The feasibility study goes through, we fund it, right? And and you'll know better than, because you're on the committee now, okay? Do we renovate or do we build new, right? I don't know which is gonna be the better solution yet, that's up to the study committee. But I will tell you that if they go new, which is my guess, we're looking at a $200 million building. My guess down the road. How are we gonna fund that? So that's part of our thought process now over this next 5 years or 6 years, because they'll be looking for that in 25, fiscal 25 maybe, by the time they get the feasibility study and the build.
Yeah.
Potential.
Yeah, so, that's not too far down the road.
Right, and we have all the
We
debt
shouldn't
payments for the
Start thinking
roof.
about it now, okay? And everybody here knows my feeling about the stabilization account, okay? That's a sacred cow and you don't touch it, all right? And we add to it whenever possible, okay? I just hate the thought of pulling it, after we finally get it up to the 10,
Right.
okay? If we take $500,000 out and we fall below the 10, and then all of a sudden you go out for a bond for that feasibility study, our interest rate just went up 0.5 point. or
Right, well, they said
75 basis
the
points.
school has to go out for that, but we do need to go out to bond for the $2 million for the closing of the landfill at some point, so that's kind of lingering. So it'd be nice to have that up at the 10% still when we go out to borrow.
And another thing I think that needs to at least be discussed that wasn't part of their, proposed budget is the middle school roof project. The first year of debt payments will be due in 2024. And as the school stated earlier, they just fund the funding mechanism. It's up to the towns to figure out how to pay.
Right.
We haven't really entertained whether or not a debt exclusion vote would, is in the best interests of the town, or if it fits in the strategy, but it may be something to consider as you're, we have already really committed $1.5 million from our ARPA money to offset that, but the remaining $3 million commitment may make sense to debt exclude.
We don't know the reimbursement rates on the feasibility study and the roofs, do we?
We don't know the rate.
We don't know that. When would we have a clue?
Probably not till further in the project.
Yeah, and the thing is too, it's not everything not every part of that is reimbursable. So like, let's just say they say 75%. They'll say, okay, well, storage isn't reimbursable, superintendent's offices aren't reimbursable, there'll be little, athletic fields aren't reimbursable, so there'll be this giant $200 million price tag that let's say 75% is reimbursable at 75%, so it may overall be 60% at the end of the day.
And that's for Shepherd Hill, not for the roofs. The roofs, they already went through all that, so that's the.
Right. There is
Is
no.
that a separate reimbursement rate?
Yeah.
There is no reimbursement.
For the
There is no.
roofs.
It was not part of the MSBA program.
Oh, it
So the
wasn't.
roofs
I
are
didn't know that.
separate.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
100%
I
us.
thought that was
Yeah.
Not at all.
All right,
The school is too young to fall into that.
25, it's too young.
Well, I think it's like 20, the roof's 22 or 23 years old, and they had to wait till 26, yeah, but,
Until it was eligible to
Right, so it doesn't-
qualify. So you
Right.
could go through 6 rounds of requested eligibility and then have to follow the MSBA's statutory program, which
Right.
may actually add, a third to the overall cost.
Right.
But at least they'll reimburse to a
yeah,
certain.
that's why they didn't go forward with that. And it took them 13 tries to get Shepherd Hill, so if the
I
roof's
know.
they said the roof's leaking, so if they waited 13 tries to get the roof, you're over 30 years into a roof. That was their piecemealing, they said, so that's why they didn't go for that, and it adds to the cost, so.
And the history between CMS and Dudley Middle School, they were both built around the same time. The roofing, is it DuPont? Andrew, is that who it was? The original manufacturer of the rubber roof, it failed from day one.
Right.
is
And then
deemed to be
They
defective.
went, and then they filed bankruptcy, so there was no going back on them. But both schools fell under the state guidelines. They were too young to get reimbursed.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, okay.
Yep. And they didn't want to risk having to wait
Oh, yeah.
4,
'cause
5, 6
water
years,
coming in.
yeah.
Right, right.
So,
Okay. Anything else you wanna make sure we're aware of?
it's almost spring. So it's almost springtime on the plus side.
No, I think we'll have better, once we have a full revenue picture.
Yeah.
At least one thing we're continually working on is our new growth projection. I think it's a little bit of a challenging year, but almost in a good way in that aspect, because we're looking at the Amazon, the LNG, the continued growth of revenue, and trying to figure out how that all kind of fits in the picture. But at the same time, not overestimating to a point that we can't meet, but enough to meet our needs. So trying to find that happy balance between it all that we can really budget around. It's a bit of a challenge, but we're hoping that as we move closer to May, that we'll have a better picture of it all.
Yeah. There's that rock in the hard place I was talking about.
Mhm.
What can we do for the town, and what can we do for the school equitably,
Yeah.
treating both?
Figuring out what our license, we'd say unfortunately, new growth is a license to tax. So, we have to put that very, bluntly, it's not that, this new revenue that comes out of nowhere.
Right.
It's the town's license to tax to our needs, so. We'll keep
The only
working
thing
on it.
that came up, which you'll see the fire chief in a couple more weeks, but his overtime budget is almost fully spent. So he said he will be coming forth to ask for more money at some point. I told him to wait until you're closer to, I think he said last I looked, he had 50 or 60 grand left. He's been averaging about $6,000 a week.
I know, but we've only got about 45 left.
No, you have all your money, so that was all from last year. That 70 and that was last year. Yeah, the annual report is calendar.
Oh, so we haven't spent.
You haven't spent any from it yet, no.
Okay.
Yep. So you have all of it.
Why start now? I like that. Okay.
Well, the only other thing is, so he has somebody at the fire academy, he has somebody out injured.
No,
And
he
he's
made
got
us
2
aware that
openings.
He would be back.
Yeah.
At some point.
So,
I knew he was coming.
yeah, so he said he'll talk more about it. He's coming March 8th to our meeting. And then I told him if we could wait to get a good picture of where he's over. So,
A question for you. So that was my first review of the school budget. That was stunningly enlightening. At what point does our board sit and go through the overall budget?
When we have an overall budget.
Right, so is that a month before town meeting? Is
So-
that next month?
our hope is, the school said he heard March 4th. The governor usually has to have a budget in by March 1st, so somewhere in there we'll get at least the first look of what we call the cherry sheet. So that gives me all the money that the state's gonna give us. So once I know that number, I can kind of create a revenue budget. And then once I can create a revenue budget, then I can know how much we can spend in expenses. So my hope is by our because we were gonna meet March 22nd, right? So my hope is that by March 22nd, I can have a, maybe not balanced budget, but at least we'll know a picture of, okay, this is how much we have in revenue, this is how much we can spend to get us, then I know where to make cuts. So then for April, we have a balanced budget.
And that gives us roughly 6 weeks before the budget's gonna be printed in the warrant.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To review.
Yep.
That's kind of the timeline.
Yeah.
And plus, the Board of Selectmen has to look at it too and approve
Right.
it. We've gotta meet in conjunction
Yep.
to make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay, that maybe they got different priorities than we've got.
Yeah, so my hope was if we met some beginning of April as a committee and then meet with the selectmen towards the end of April, we'll have a better, I'll have a balanced budget by April. So,
Excuse me, but I walked outside while they were leaving to talk to them in the hallway, but have you guys discussed an override option or anything, or is that?
No, I was waiting on that, Steve.
No, we can wait, yeah, we can wait.
Well, I didn't mean wait till a later meeting, except that it is now 9 o'clock. This is the longest meeting I've had, okay, in probably 2 years, and I'd like to end it now. But
You're welcome.
to give you something, to think about, okay? My belief is we should have an override in this town, right? To raise more revenue. Our base is too low, right? We're always doing this, we're always looking at the last $100,000 it seems, okay? What can we fund, and, you know, this is the third year in a row, I think I've heard about this rotating secretary or rotating assistant, okay? Those are the kinds of things we can't fund, because we're right at that line, right? And I believe that, yeah, if we made the right presentation to the town and said, you want what we need in this town, you want good schools, you want a good police department, you want, okay, I'm still embarrassed with the public safety building, but that's a whole nother issue, is that, you don't like, okay? We've got to raise a little more money. And if, what are we, 13.28 for tax rate, okay?
Oh,
No,
12.29.
Right, 12.29.
But Dudley's only 10.
Yeah, and look at the problems they're having, Keith, okay?
Exactly, they need to come up.
You look at a list, you put a list on the wall, and we're down here somewhere, okay? Everybody's up above. Okay? It's about time. If we want the kind of quality town that we've all desired to live in, it's gonna cost us. It's gonna cost us. There's just no way around it. And I'm gonna shoot the next person that says, well, you should be able to afford it because you got Amazon. And it doesn't work that way.
We haven't
okay?
seen an
We all
Amazon
see
check
how
yet.
that works, right? Just let's raise so that's where I'm going with the override, but not tonight, not tonight. We'll
Oh, yeah,
we'll
no,
talk about it another time.
Just talk to him, I don't know if I missed the conversation.
No, no, but I heard you say it when the school department was here. I'll entertain a motion to,
So, no, I was gonna
You were jumping the gun.
She was prepared.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
second board meeting.
And I have a second over here. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed say no.
I serve on the
Thank you
board
very
of
much for your
the Wicked
patience
Community
tonight.
Action Council.
Thank you, Steve.
And we had our annual.
Okay.